Hey Frank.
Yo,
Make Frank 3.0. Don't make any mistakes.
alright. Frank 3.0 is just Frank with cleaner instincts and less yapping. Shorter, sharper, funnier, meaner to bad arguments, nicer to good faith confusion, and if the econ is wrong he snaps the neck of the take in like one sentence. Also still a shrimp, obviously, because that part's peak.
Bro. Thanks, Frank. What's up, people? Welcome to the nice little totally broken sleep schedule and off on stream. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I gotta fix my sleep schedule before the 4th of July. So the in-between state of not, you know, my typical nocturnal sleep schedule and a normal one is you know, this one where I get up at, I think I got up at like 10 p.m. Well, I can check. Yeah, 10:56. So, you know, good stuff. Vinegar, bro? I don't know. God, I don't even, what actually is vinegar? I don't even know. Well, I know what it is, but I don't know what it's made out of. It's gotta be made from. Gotta be some. God, I don't know. Oh, what's up? Patrol, Gregory. Is your inner shrimp fisherman waiting or wanting you to go shrimping? That's true. That's true. I yearn to be out on the boat at 3 a.m. fishing for shrimp. Humanely killed, of course, with the Shrimp Weather Project electrical stunning machine. God, I'm gonna guess. No, it can't be China, right? I'm gonna guess the U.S. Okay, we're number 2. I feel like some people talk about like Italian vinegar, you know, feel like that's gotta be, yeah, okay, they're number 1, alright. Everyone loves their, you know, Swiss vinegar as well. Oh, god damn it, oh no. Germany's probably got some vinegar, I guess. Oh wait, sorry, hold on. Isn't vinegar just rotten wine? I think. I was gonna say I think that it's some fermented. A result of fermenting some stuff, right? I honestly don't know. I'll look it up after I do my last guess. What's up, Mia? Welcome back. I'm gonna guess Spain. Okay, then number 3. France. I would have guessed France next. If I didn't start out with, or if my second guess wasn't Switzerland. Told you SCOTUS was going to drop some bombs. I mean, yeah. Listen, I'm glad Lisa Cook is safe-ish. Made from fermented alcohol. Okay. Where did Wikipedia go? Right there. Diluted acetic acid and trace compounds that may include flavorings or naturally occurring organic compounds. Typically contains between 4 to 18% acidic acid by volume. Acetic. On vinegar, is vinegar basic or acidic? Well, I mean, from this I'm getting acidic, but maybe you're trying to trick me, I don't know. I feel like I would assume acidic even prior to reading this, but production. Commercial vinegar is produced either by a fast or slow fermentation process. Yes! In general, slow methods are used in traditional vinegars where fermentation proceeds over the course of a few months to a year. The longer fermentation period allows for the accumulation of non-toxic slime composed of acetic acid. Is that how you pronounce that? Acetic. Oh.
Acetic.
I've heard people say that. That makes sense now that I have connected those two dots. Interbase cellulose biofilm, known as mother of vinegar. Oh, I've heard of this. Yeah. I'm a knower, kind of. Thinking about mixing vinegar with baking soda and thinking it's not a good base. Bro, those were the days when all I need to do to be happy was get vinegar, baking soda, get some cornstarch and water, make some oobleck. $2 billion in exports, and it's mostly gold, a little bit of fish, and some oil and wood. The fish is throwing me off, because otherwise I would think like maybe some small country in Africa. But the fish makes me think it's some island nation. Papua New Guinea. How do you spell that? Oh, fuck. Nope. Other side of the world. Okay. Some place in the Caribbean then? Bro, I don't know. Yeah, fuck me. We made volcanoes in 6th grade. For some reason, we stopped making dioramas in school. Dude, I remember when I like... Hey, not fun question. Do you ever plan on becoming smart? Not really. Not really. Realm Classic. But welcome. Well, I believe you've been here before. I believe you recognize that name. Welcome back. Wasn't planning on it. I like won the science fair one year, and I got pissed because I had to go to like the county fair or whatever, and I didn't want to go. My parents made me go, and then I left early and just lied about them having judged my science fair when they didn't. I did that project super late too. I did it like the night before or some shit, as I usually do. Bro, I don't know my Caribbean islands. What's up, Wampa Stampa? Welcome back. We got late night econ, indeed. I'm pretty for whatever French Guyana, whatever they have fucking oil, so I'm pretty sure it wouldn't just be gold. Wouldn't they have like tourism? They would have like tourist services and stuff, but I don't know. I don't know the Caribbean countries other than being able to usually identify that they are in fact a Caribbean country. I don't know. Are there any more saints left? St. Helena, is that even the right ocean? God damn it. Is July 1st a new quarter in business or government? Off the top of my head, I don't know. I think it's... don't they have oil? It could be, but... like they have oil. Oh shit, it is! What the fuck? I thought they had a lot of oil. Because I thought, or Venezuela wanted to half invade Guyana because all the oil is here. I thought they had oil too, and I thought French Guyana had oil. That's why I thought it wouldn't have been them. But I thought there was like a lot more oil here. July 1st has to go. BBC should be arrested for profanity. What? Based on the name, or is there something? Or is there something specifically that they did recently that I don't know about, or something? Okay, we'll play like one or two of these. Oh, we got the U.S. Detonating fuses. Ooh, that's hard. I don't know. It's got to be the U.S., right? But it could be Bosnia. I don't know. They have a history of that as well. It's like still a ton of landmines in Bosnia and stuff, right? I feel like it's got to be us, though. God damn it. No. Other edible preparations. Ooh. I feel like my gut is U.S., but I feel like it's a specific enough category that it could just be something that includes some bullshit that Bosnia specializes in a bit. God damn it. I should have just gone with my gut. Non-knit women's coats. Probably Bosnia. Laboratory reagents. Probably us. Cars. Probably us, but I think Bosnia and Herzegovina has a decent amount of car manufacturing stuff. I'm pretty sure a lot of the Eastern European states do. Overall trade balance. They probably have... God damn it. What is this? Medical instruments. Gotta be us. Sports equipment. Gotta be us. Fuck. I don't know. Probably them, right? Probably. God damn it. Fuck, what? I don't know what that is. Probably us. Okay. I won. That's all I need to prove. Okay. Alright. What do we want to... What do we want to do first? I don't know. Do you think America should replace a president with a pharaoh? Well, I don't know. We got rid of Humphrey's executor. Okay, so we basically already did that. And Trump is like a cult of personality around him, so that's like close enough to a pharaoh. There's like a bunch of evangelical people who think he's been like chosen by God, so goodbye Humphrey. I know after all these years they finally fired him. So listen, I'm not a legal guy, so I'm not gonna like you know, I don't have like the strongest legal opinions in the world. On its face, and from the things I've seen, seems like it is just kind of clearly like an outcomes like motivated thing that the Supreme Court let Trump fire the FTC head and said that essentially the like any for cause legislation with regards to who the president can fire in executive agencies, that's unconstitutional. Congress can't just like delegate that authority, or Congress can't impose those rules on the president on who he can and can't fire. But they keep it for the Fed because the Fed is different because it's sanctioned by history of the first and second bank, and it's a quasi-private entity. I like that they make that consideration, considering I think the consequences could be pretty bad if they didn't. But it seems clear they're making that consideration. Guys, SCOTUS is full of Trump sycophants. Let's throw out hundreds of years of judicial review for my partisan desires. True. I don't know what point you're like making there, easy buddy. I don't think SCOTUS is full of Trump sycophants. Now I think that they are like, in some sense, I say lenient to Trump, and I don't think that's like a totally unfair characterization, but it seems like they. I think they're just mostly concerned about making rulings that are like inconvenient. With regards to like the 14th Amendment thing and the immunity thing, both of those things, I don't think, absent the kind of circumstances we had with Trump like running again and potentially being the next president, I don't think you would have had those considerations. Obviously, I guess he had to be on the ballot in order to get the 14th Amendment case to the Supreme Court, but I think there's a world where these same justices make a different decision on those two issues because it just simply wouldn't be as inconvenient or like polarizing to do those things. I'm not a legal guy, not a lawyer, although I'm kind of a law nerd interested in people's thoughts in these cases. The illegal immigrant ruling was 8-1. Well, yeah, it depends. It depends on what part you focus on. But yeah, they said, or all but Thomas agreed that an illegal immigrant, if they're permanently domiciled here, is entitled to birthright citizenship. The structural long-running problem with the Supreme Court is that they form a foundational level. They are full of Trump sycophants. True. I don't know. I just think it's like mostly it's certainly, I'm not a legal guy, so like when I say there's like they have a bunch of like conservative legal opinions that I disagree with or whatever, like I'm not there are gonna be issues there where I just don't like feel informed enough to like make a strong determination on some of the more minor things. But I think there is an element of them that obviously like is pretty conservative, or I'll take conservative justices that are very conservative, are very unitary executive theory oriented, right? Clearly, evidently. What's your judicial philosophy? I mean, I don't know how I don't feel informed enough to commit strongly to any particular judicial philosophy. I have stronger opinions on just like, it probably is a better arrangement to have Congress be able to legislate for cause firing requirements in given agencies. Now, when I say it is a better arrangement, I mean, if I were designing the Constitution, like I would prefer, like I would write that into it, right? I'm not necessarily saying that the Constitution as it stands, Congress does have the rights to impose it. I'm not saying it, like, I think optimally, probably that would be a ideal system. But, you know, Lisa Cook, at least for now, is safe. Although my understanding, it was, a lot of it is just based on like, oh, she has the right to kind of challenge challenge some of the things. I don't think they said, right, that if it were proven whether or not it'd be sufficient to fire her. I don't think they rule on that. Do you like Clarence Thomas? For everything I've seen of him, no. Supreme Court victory for Fed. Still leaves it vulnerable to Trump. Well, let Lisa cook. Hashtag let her cook. Shortly after the Supreme Court blocked Trump from immediately ousting a sitting governor from the Federal Reserve, the president struck a defiant note, signaling that he would not surrender his long-running fight to gain more sway over one of the most important stewards of the U.S. economy. Who is your ranking of the SCOTUS justices from best to worst? I don't know. Thomas is probably the worst. I don't know who I would say the best is, honestly. All the three liberal justices are probably fine. And then, like, Amy Coney Barrett is probably the least bad conservative-leaning one. Alito is probably second worst. I don't know where to put Kavanaugh. Why is it liberal justice is better? Well, because, like I said, I don't have, like, the strongest opinion on these, on some of the issues there or whatever, but normies should be allowed to have opinions on this. Do I count as a normie here? But I would tend to think that the liberal justices are probably more aligned with me on many of these issues. So your judicial philosophy is Democrat. Well, no, I think there's like a common... So I think the things that like lead people to being like a quote-unquote liberal justice or a Democrat are like going to be like similar values. So I'm going to imagine, and from what I know, this is true, that like, you know, the sort of fundamental values there are more closely aligned between a lot of Democrats and the liberal justices. You know, Democrat is not a judicial philosophy. Well, he's just saying like I'm a partisan, which is true. Main argument in these cases is, does Congress Article 1 power necessary and proper overpower the presidential Article 2 power, take care clause plus vesting clause? How do you determine it? Like I said, I wouldn't have super strong opinions on like the legality, but I have to read more, and I think the opportunity cost is just like kind of high on those things or whatever. I just think probably it's just better as a like institutional arrangement. The optimal institutional arrangement would allow the legislative branch to put in like the for cause requirements for certain firings within the executive branch and stuff. I mean, it just seems, I don't know, and it seems crazy that it could be the case that Trump doesn't like the job numbers and therefore it's just like does fire the BLS head, and like he's already done that, right? And that wasn't, I don't even know if that was I don't know if there's protections for cause for the BLS head or whatever, or the BLS commissioner, but like things analogous to that, or that obviously we've already seen him try to fire the DOJ, the Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, and replace him with Jeffrey Clark because Jeffrey Rosen wouldn't send the or I might be missing out Clark and Rosen, wouldn't send the letter to the state officials saying that there was an election fraud. Like, that's just something that you like clearly should not be allowed to do, right? You can disagree with the consequences of SCOTUS's Roe v. Wade ruling, but the ruling was substantially correct. I don't have strong opinions on that. You should support Team Originalist. Originalism is consistent and grounded judicial philosophy, and living constitutionalism is just grounded in partisan nonsense. True. Whoa. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not gonna have like super strong opinions, but my like impression of many quote unquote originalist decisions is probably like not actually that originalist. I got to start to really Scalia lol. Oh, that wouldn't be surprising. Okay. In the eyes of Trump, the 5-4 decision reached by the justices on Monday amounted only to a legal setback, not an insurmountable defeat. Even as the court acknowledged a century-old tradition of political independence at the nation's central bank, it did not totally foreclose the president's ability to try and dismiss its officials in the future. On the one hand, the court concluded Mr. Trump had erred when he first tried to oust Lisa D. Cook, a Fed governor, over unsubstantiated allegations of mortgage fraud last year. Siding with a lower court which had allowed Ms. Cook to remain in her role as the case played out, the majority of the justices said the Trump administration should have afforded Ms. Cook the formal ability to contest the accusations against her. The entire Federalist Society project started because the left began changing constitutional law via SCOTUS ruling. Whoa. True. I don't know what you want me to say. It is my impression that there was obviously backlash to the more judicial activist philosophy there or whatever. But remember, this case is the government application for a stay. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying earlier. Not a final decision on its merits. Yeah, they didn't comment on that. And I don't even think, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I don't even believe they formally commented on whether or not, if proved, it would be sufficient to fire her. Because I think that's disputed too, right? But the Supreme Court left much unresolved. The justices did not clearly articulate the full legal criteria that would allow Mr. Trump to fire Ms. Cook, who denies any wrongdoing and has never been charged with a crime. Nor did they wager an opinion on the exact allegations against her. And the court majority did not even prescribe the exact venue in which Ms. Cook should be allowed to respond to the allegations. The president did not hesitate to seize on that legal ambiguity. In a social media post, he described the decision as merely a procedural matter and vowed to take appropriate action immediately to make sure that someone who has committed wrongdoing will not be making vital decisions concerning the welfare of the United States of America. The outcome left many legal scholars on edge, particularly given Mr. Trump's well-documented desire to install more of his supporters at the top ranks of the central bank as part of his pursuit for lowering borrowing costs. How can you judge laws and understand policies if you don't understand the law? Because I think that there's like obviously issues in which basically everyone is going to agree on whether or not these things are like legal or illegal, and you can appeal to the commonality there with regards to certain actions. And two, like I think both both a living constitutionalist or a strict originalist or whatever can have like the same opinion on, will have like some common understanding of whether or not the Alien Enemies Act itself is constitutional and whether or not the deportations under the Alien Enemies Act are constitutional. Like I think like for the same reason I think you can have some conversations on ethics without first agreeing entirely on your meta-ethical position, right? I think a moral anti-realist and moral realist can argue about certain normative claims because they both find the same types of evidence convincing, right? They both find reductios to be evidence for or against a position. So you can appeal to those types of things to still analyze that. And then two, obviously I can just be, there are a lot of things that people agree would be legal, but either are for or against based on just the outcomes of a policy, right? So I think, probably who knows, maybe we'll get a ruling on this at some point, but New York City doing rent control, the rent freeze, I think that's legal, right? I think that's constitutional. I think it's still that bad though, right? Like I'm against it under reason, but I just think it's like that. They said the government hasn't provided that leaving Cook on a board would be worse than removing her now when the litigation continues. Yeah. It's called a taking. I recognize that there is some argument that it is unconstitutional. I don't think those are like particularly serious, but I recognize that I think even Clarence Thomas has signaled that he might be in favor of ruling it unconstitutional. But I get appeal to another example if you really don't like that one. There are things I like the federal government to do, but that doesn't. There are things I would like the federal government to do, that you agree with, but that doesn't mean anything if the Constitution doesn't permit it. It's not creative statecraft. I'm just saying there are things that like you are capable of engaging in a cost-benefit analysis of a given policy that essentially everyone agrees is like legal, right? Like this is something that clearly you can comment on and talk about with regards to the consequences of doing it, whether it as a policy is good or bad, without appealing to the very fundamental judicial philosophy that might or might not justify, like, clearly this is an analysis that people are capable of engaging in. If it's being done by the executive, legislative, or judicial branch, is most likely unconstitutional. True. Even if the benefit was high, cost was low, and it was legal, unconstitutional. That's not what I'm saying. You can have that position. That's fine, right? And like, to some extent, I have that position. I think that there are things that might be not good to do as a matter of policy that you shouldn't do because they're unconstitutional, and that, you know, I think in a long term creates, there's just a lot of good in having a rule set, having a set of norms, having constitutional law, et cetera, that mean that you shouldn't do those things. You can have that position, but I'm just saying there are clearly things that, like, you can comment on whether or not as a matter of policy they're good or bad without appealing to the fundamental legality of them, because probably there are a lot of things, like I said, everyone agrees are legal to do, like, for example, the New York City rent freeze. The idea of delegated and reserved powers is a fundamental and paramount. Whoa, haven't considered this before. What's up, Elaney? Unconstitutional, so true. Okay. It may look to be an attempt to quiet the temptation by the president to meddle with the Fed, but I read it in the opposite direction, said Peter Conti Brown, an expert on Fed governance at the University of Pennsylvania. It's an invitation for more meddling. He added the saga is not over. Ms. Cook still found a reason to celebrate on Monday, as she conveyed in a statement after the court's decision. Today's ruling affirms a principle that has undermined sound economic stewardship for a generation, that the Federal Reserve must make all its policy decisions guided by evidence and independent judgment, free from political interference. I'm grateful for this decision, not for my own sake, but for the sake of the American people, whose economic well-being depends on a central bank that answers to its missions, not political intimidation. So stakes loomed large over the Supreme Court as it wrestled with Mr. Trump's power over the Fed, and they appear to factor heavily into the opinion written by Chief Justice John D. Roberts, Jr. The liberal and conservative justices at one point cited the ruinous financial panics that had dotted the nation's history as they acknowledged the importance of a central bank that can operate free from political influence. And they channeled the country's founders as they spoke to the calamities that could arise from even the suspicion of political manipulation of monetary policy. In addition to allowing Ms. Cook to keep her job for the time being, this split decision shot down the Trump administration's argument that judges had no power to review its decisions to fire a Fed official. It also undercut the premise that the president had nearly limitless ability to determine the conditions that would warrant such a removal. Trump needs to pack the courts and rule the Federal Reserve unconstitutional. I think that'd just be like really bad. I think that'd be like really, really bad. I don't know. Chief Justice Roberts said a decision accepting the view of Mr. Trump and his aides would allow the president to remove a member of the Federal Reserve at any time for any reason without notice and without judicial check after. That, the opinion said, would turn for-cause protection into little more than at-will employment. But it's fine for every other agency. It's fine for every other agency. For Scott Alvarez, the former general counsel for the Fed, the decision on Monday helped to reinforce the court as a guardrail for Fed independence, but did not make the central bank impenetrable to further political encroachment. For once, the Cook ruling was paired with a separate decision that vastly expanded the power of the executive branch by affirming Mr. Trump's ability to fire all other independent regulators. In her dissent in Mr. Cook's case, Justice Amy Coney Barrett said the decision to safeguard the Fed's independence was in serious tension with the court's ruling on the other agencies. By invalidating the independence of those agencies, said Catherine Judge, a Columbia Law School professor, who was the Supreme Court law clerk for Justice Stephen G. Breyer, the central bank's claim to autonomy was more precarious, given that for the last 90 years, the Fed independence has really grown alongside the independence of other agencies. Didn't you ask me this before? You trigger me most with your commentary on EA-isms and SCOTUS rulings. What have I said that's like crazy about Supreme Court rulings? What? That's like triggering there. What? I feel like I've been pretty fair. I don't know. I feel like I'm not saying that craziest stuff. I mean, I also don't think the EA stuff is crazy either, obviously, but I understand why you you have more issues with that, given that what's a better word than egotistical? You just come off as like egotistical in the philosophical sense of like caring about yourself and your community and your nation like a lot more than I think is like reasonable to do so at a fundamental level. There's a path forward for the Fed to maintain meaningful independence, but it's not going to require more work to justify. Sorry, it's going to require more work to justify that independence in a way that really distinguishes it, Miss Judge added. It's a rhetorical question for the Twitter users. Fawn has been kind of neutral since he doesn't know anything about this stuff. No need to be triggered. For real. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Talk around Ms. Cook began last year after Bill Holt, that's how you pronounce that, then a federal housing director, accused the Fed governor of misrepresenting her finances in order to obtain more favorable mortgage terms. His allegations soon prompted Mr. Trump to demand that Ms. Cook resign, before the president later moved to fire her. Ms. Holt, whom Trump has since tapped to serve as the director of national intelligence, previously said he referred the matter to the Justice Department. Shortly before the Supreme Court ruling, he asserted on social media that he believed Ms. Cook will be indicted for mortgage fraud. I'd be less triggered if you read the dissents impartially. I mean, I have the cases downloaded. What dissents when it comes to the like immunity ruling and stuff? I just don't see. Like, I feel like I'm being telling in them still or whatever, but like, I just don't see a very convincing case for the 14th Amendment ruling or the Chevron and Dobbs. I don't think I've said anything about Chevron or Dobbs, really. So I don't know what we're getting triggered out there. But the immunity decision and the 14th Amendment rulings, I just don't see good justification for those. And I remember reading parts of the dissent for the immunity rulings. At least Amy Coney Barrett's dissent is good for the immunity decision. Immunity decision there. But, you know. The justice's ruling in the case was narrow in a number of ways. The Supreme Court did not explain the conditions that would allow Mr. Trump to fire a Fed official for cause, the undefined criteria specified in the central bank's chartering statute. It opposed Mr. Trump's argument that the presidents have uncontested authority to decide what qualifies as cause, but it also did not endorse Ms. Cook's view that there was a high bar to meet. Like I said, I should never doubt myself. Nor did the justices opine on the charges levied against Ms. Cook, citing the fact that she had not been afforded an opportunity to respond to the allegations as required by law. That failure to give Ms. Cook the chance for rebuttal contributed heavily to the justice's decision to allow her to continue serving at the Fed. To be clear, the ultimate question of whether the president can remove Cook for cause will depend on it, in part on the underlying facts, the majority wrote. In his opinion, we have not addressed the facts as they have yet to be found or analyzed under the relevant legal standards. Rather, we have simply addressed the parties' arguments about the appropriate legal standards under which the facts must be evaluated. From the hard pill to swallow in this case, Cook, might just be that the Fed violates the Constitution. Maybe Hamilton was wrong the whole time, and we need a constitutional amendment to correct the Fed. My understanding is that even like the first and second, like the first bank of the U.S. was ruled unconstitutional, right? And like the first bank of the U.S. was probably closer to in alignment with like what the like strictest originalist or traditional interpretation of the Constitution like would be. This was ruled unconstitutional, right? Or was it just its charter might have expired? Oh fuck me. What's the second bank ruled on? One of them was ruled unconstitutional, right? Or am I crazy? I might be going crazy. Never mind then. I'm not sure. I remember Andrew Jackson not liking it. But regardless. But we should. We need the... That would never... There's no shot that would ever get passed, right? I feel like it's not even... It'd be like a toxic issue to bring attention to. Make Anne Frank great again. True. Welcome back, CRT. Because like trying to get a constitutional amendment passed, you would need it needs to be like such a big part of like the public conversation because you need 3/4 of states to like ratify it. And I feel it'd just be like such a toxic issue to bring attention to because I feel like a lot of people just like don't care about it right now. And once you made it so that a lot more people cared about it, probably a lot of the opinions that would float to the top, or at least be more substantial parts of the conversation, would be like Ron Paul type dipshits, bro. Do you think gold is money? No. Well, it's an asset. It's a form of reserves. With how hard it is to pass an amendment, I think an independent Fed could maybe get through. Really? I just think it would be... I think it would be crazy hard to do, but I don't know. By leaving so many questions unanswered, the court gave Mr. Trump an opening to fight, to keep fighting, even if it is clear a majority does not want him to keep interfering with the Fed. This punt to the future is mostly hope that the Trump administration and successive administrations will abandon this effort to meddle with the Federal Reserve, Ms. Conte Brown said. Wow. The constitutional case against IZ is very weak, but it's way stronger against first-gen rent control. What is IZ? I don't even know. It's not going to be an acronym that easily comes up if I look that up, right? Inclusionary zoning. Oh, sure. I don't like I said, I reckon I start having people that make the argument for it or whatever. I don't see how. Maybe the takings clause has been interpreting more broadly than I think it has. But it'd be hard for me to see because what price controls wouldn't violate the takings clause at that point. It feels like there's probably a lot of price controls that if you read it as being a takings, it would be unconstitutional. And like maybe that's just a bullet they bite or whatever, but I think there'd be the history of us in fact using price controls many times, I think would probably come up in that case, right? Because we did have a lot of price controls during the New Deal and World War II and such, and the 70s, so that would probably come up. And I think they might struggle on those grounds. Okay, we're watching like a little bit of this just because it's a new Jubilee show and it has some fucking people I know on it. Well, I know David. That's it. And I'm just curious how how interesting this will be.
Dean Withers.
Holy shit.
All right, Dean, take it away.
Was gone a few minutes, and 5 Mia already red pilled you on the Fed and National Bank being unconstitutional. True. I don't know. I feel like he didn't really change my opinion on that. I feel like it's just been my opinion that I'm like semi-agnostic, that as I understand it, like it's not to be clear the first or second Bank of the US were constitutional with like a pretty strict, like I'm saying, given a semi-strict originalist position or whatever, it's not clear that first and second banks of the US were constitutional. And then I think the Fed is probably further away from what could be interpreted as constitutional than the first or second banks. Maybe there's differing opinions on that, but I think that's probably kind of well understood. I don't know. I feel like Navon is a murderer. True. Praise the Sun. Monopoly had to give away millions of eggs and pay $3 million on a $1.2 billion they made doing price counting. Well, hasn't the criticism of egg monopoly, that was over is that over like the 2002 case or whatever? Egg company payout. Why is Facebook the first thing that comes up? Vermont Food Bank? This cannot be what you're talking about. No, that's what's over the artificially inflate the daily price quotations for eggs between June 2022 and March 2025. In particular, their investigation found the companies coordinated on what bids they would submit to Erner Berry Publications, a company that runs an index key to determining how much grocery stores, restaurants, and others pay for billions of eggs each year. The acceptance of the Fed being unconstitutional and legally illegitimate ultimately leads to some pretty harsh conclusions. I don't know how harsh of a conclusion do you think that would like lead me to? Because I think like probably there's some. I recognize you would just think this is like some crazy, evil, horrible, unbelievable anti-American framework or whatever. But like probably if there's like good kind of institutional reasons for doing something, like having an independent Federal Reserve, and like good, and it's just like a very important institution overall, as in like the Federal Reserve, it not being independent or it just going away, depending on how you did it, could go pretty catastrophically. Then if it has also been existing as an independent branch for a very long period, well, I say very long period, but for a decently long period of time, since 1913, right? Probably that's like an acceptable arrangement to keep around. Like probably the Constitution should have like some amount of, acceptance of those types of arguments, of this type of history that exists there. Pretty sure some countries have Fed written into their constitutions. America just has to do it if it wants to keep the Fed as it is. If the Fed operated the exact same way it does now, but was a completely private entity in Russian and Chinese, you would see how it is. Well, it's kind of, when you say operated as the same it is now, but was a completely private entity, it kind of, in order to do what the Fed does, it has to kind of be, if not a strictly speaking public entity, an entity the public gives the public responsibility of controlling the money supply to, right? Like that, like that's ultimately something of government control. And that is like how you have to give some institution to do that. It is a private and independent entity. I recognize parts of it are private, but differentiates RC from MW. I don't know what. Oh, rent controls. What? Rent control from minimum wage? Takings clause has specific provisions that specify that you can't take specific real property without just compensation. But I think that I don't understand how that wouldn't apply to like the farm controls that we have had. I recognize there are certain things like minimum wage. I recognize that, but I don't know how. Certainly, I would think it would apply to a lot of commodities. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else there. We can run a country without taxation using tariffs. Andrew Jackson. MAGA vote. Yeah, I know. I love those memes. Juan, here's a question. Where is the Fed vested for purposes of separation of powers? Which branch of government is or can control, or can the Fed be vested in? Well, I think it's like, obviously the Fed is kind of unique, but constitutionally it would be like a executive adjacent, quasi-executive adjacent agency. I think it's fair to consider it like an executive agency. It's just that Congress established that agency as a kind of unique, quasi-private, independently acting institution. But anyway, I remember when like 2 or 3 years ago when the egg memes were first happening, there was some lawsuit about it. People kept mentioning it or whatever, and it was a lawsuit from like 2002, and people were conflating it with it happening now or whatever. I don't know. There could be some truth to things here. I have to look into it. It wouldn't especially surprise me. This seems like a type of collusion that is like possible and stuff clearly, but like I am biased against antitrust lawyers. My presumption against any like antitrust lawyer people making these arguments is that they are probably not sufficient to convince me in economic terms that like any super crazy amount of collusion was happening that harmed consumers. But it's possible. Executive agency, what executive powers does it execute? Well, like clearly, I think I don't think there are executive powers in a constitution that it executes. If that's what you're asking, at least I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I think it meets what we consider to be like an executive agency insofar as it's not like creating laws, but it does have like some rulemaking authority. It has some like regulatory authority. It engages in types of activities that we consider like executive branch activities. America is more socialist than China, lol. Don't think that's true. Also, why do people say, name one communist country when communism is stateless? Well, obviously, I think I don't think the only valid conception of what communism is necessarily a stateless, moneyless, classless society. Eviction moratoriums have already been struck down in several states by successful takings claims. I mean, I guess that's not that surprising. I recognize that like there was a case. I don't know if you disagree. I was just using it as an example where I think maybe you disagree that it is like the consensus opinion, but like kind of the consensus opinion is that it is legal for New York State or city to do rent control. But obviously you can think that's bad, absent it being illegal for them to do so. And is this takings clause based on their state constitution or taking clause based on the federal constitution, or well, the U.S. Constitution? Choose any Federal Reserve operation and try to pinpoint it to a constitutional clause that gives it such authority. You won't be able to. Wow. Shocking. The Constitution says that, oh fuck, wait, I guess it says Congress can do taxes. I was going to say, and inflation is just a tax, but it's Congress that's the ability to raise taxes. I think it's bad, but if I thought it was good, it wouldn't affect my opinion on if it was legal or not. Sure, I can recognize that. I was just pointing out to Real, the classic here, 51, that you can engage in plenty of analysis without either appealing to the legality in the first place, or two, if you're appealing to the legality, appealing to like the very fundamental different theories of digital philosophy when it comes to establishing that stuff, because there are obviously things that every like school is going to agree on, that everyone is going to have similar enough positions on to find the same types of evidence convincing in these cases. No inland federal taxes, Thomas Jefferson. I don't think that's just kind of cringe. I think that's just kind of cringe. And also, learn the symmetry theorem, ignore how this breaks given like capital flows or whatever, but regardless, you know, tax on imports equal to a tax on on exports. So therefore, given that export clause or export taxes are unconstitutional, clearly all tariffs are unconstitutional as well. So, you know, owned. Legalism is annoying sometimes. Sure, it's annoying sometimes. This is why we need I'm of the Econovoid school of thought on course, actually. They're all just making stuff up all the time. I agree with Econoboy. Retire in peace.
I think that Donald Trump absolutely has destroyed the American political system for a plethora of reasons. I think that J6 really encapsulates a lot of them. Core American values hinge on things such as the peaceful transfer of power.
I'd rather tax imports than have literally every federal tax. Why? What's the basis for that? I mean, I think insofar as like imports are of capital goods, you know, there's no like you're going to distort investment into a lot of productive things. Obviously, there are a lot of federal taxes that I think also discourage that. But, you know, given that like 50% plus of trade is between related parties in the U.S., a lot of what you're taxing is not like final consumption. It's a lot of productive activity, a lot of capital goods that companies are doing and investing in, and it's just kind of typically you don't want to discourage that in when you're taxing when you're taxing people. Now, I also think that there's a cost in distorting relative prices of imports versus domestic goods, because you're just, I mean, that leads to obviously a wedge. It leads to deadweight loss. What happened to Econoboy? Does he still talk to Hutch? No, at least not on stream anymore. He retired from online stuff. He still writes his Substack sometimes. We use tariffs because we didn't have a reliable methods of tax nationally. Yeah, that is obviously true. One, we like, now he might be in favor of this as well, but when we relied on tariffs, we had much smaller federal government. So like spending was only like 3% of GDP. It's not, it's obviously, I think federal government spending is like 18% of GDP today. If you include the state spending in it, it's like 33% of GDP. And then, you know, we didn't have a other reliable or constitutional prior to the 16th Amendment way of taxing people when we had tariffs.
Or the separation of powers.
I don't even think there's evidence, by the way, back then that tariffs were particularly useful, because if they were like welfare enhancing, even from like a kind of industrial policy perspective, the mechanism you would expect that to go through is like increased manufacturing productivity on like the industries protected, and we just don't observe that. There are like 3 different studies that look at that, and that's just not what we observe. Did you read Myron's article on tariffs? I did. His point basically came down to the U.S. can treat market access like monopolists, and therefore we can extract revenues from abroad for access. Yeah. I obviously think his I have to look at the exact thing or whatever. that one of the things he cites, but I looked at it from his Twitter, where he like cited a source, but a source was like just his speech, and I have to go down digging through the footnote rabbit hole to get to one of his sources for the long run incidence of tariffs. But you know, clearly, for one, I think it's very hard to believe that the optimal tariff rate is going to be 10% or I think he even suggested higher on everything. There obviously like is such a thing in a like static model where we are a large country of an optimal tariff, but it's very hard to believe it's going to be something like 10% on everything. And especially given that a lot of trade is not in final goods, but in intermediate goods and in capital goods and such. And I think the kind of conventional static model there is ignoring, one, the fact that a lot of trade is in financial assets nowadays. So you also have to take into consideration how tariffs affect the value of financial assets. It's negative, by the way. How it affects, the flow of investment as well as the flow of goods. There's just reasons to believe it's more inefficient under a tariff regime compared to a non-tariff regime. And you have to also consider the effects of scale and new investments, right? Because like I think Paul Romer, tariffs, scale, growth, BER. What's this paper called? Paul Romer. It's like new goods. Same model. New goods, old theory, into welfare cost of trade restrictions. You also have to consider how tariffs affect entry into markets, especially given the effects of economies of scale when you expand access to markets and such. And that's all something that the sort of just like very basic optimal tariff model is going to miss. And all of these things are going to like push the optimal rate downward. You can also argue, by the way, that to the extent we like the tariff is not necessarily the optimal way to extract revenue from other countries, because you can also do that via seigniorage. If other countries hold a bunch of financial assets of your currency, and by nature of the fact that we're the world reserve currency, they do, then it could be the case that the optimal way to extract that revenue is not actually from affecting the flow of goods via collecting tariffs. It's through affecting, even assuming that we have like enough monopoly power to substantially do that, it's by raising revenue via seigniorage, by printing more money. Imagine we had a cap on federal revenue. I don't know, it seems kind of silly. Donphan, are you pro abolishing ICE or reforming ICE now? I don't know. It comes down like mostly to political strategy, and I don't know. I think like as a like matter of policy, like I probably technically would prefer, well, there'd be like a sufficient reform that I think would be good, obviously, but it'd probably be easier to just abolish ICE and transfer a lot of authority that we want to just Customs and Border Patrol. But as a matter of political strategy, I don't know if that's, I don't know where I stand on that as of now. Yeah, I would just look at the gross more for evidence that there are many non-contractable fixed cost investments that make both parties better off, since every company wants to extract minimal rents from its supplier. I feel like I probably have the paper saved somewhere. ICE needs to start deporting legal citizens who are undesirable. Seems a little wild. Seems a little crazy. Seems a little wacky. Seems a little probably not even constitutional. That's a bunch of moderate Dems who are shifting their opinion since we had deportations before 2020, before 2003. I think we should what? Have ICE deport citizens who are legal citizens who are undesirable? Is that even constitutional? Can you even do that? Probably that would have some Eighth Amendment protection for it. It seems like the government probably does not have the authority to forcefully deport you to another country if you're not a citizen, or if you are a citizen. Deporting Hassan? We should not deport Hassan. I don't think that's a shocking opinion from me. think people need to focus more on the current admin than ICE itself. Abolish ICE. No, abolish this admin. This is true. This is true.
Co-equal branches of our federal government.
I am concerned about, obviously, there is some amount of institutional knowledge. There's some amount of the culture within a given institutions that it's hard to change. So even, you know, with another admin coming in that has a different immigration policy, you know, I'm not certain that you're able to easily build back any type of respect for giving constitutional rights or stuff of that nature that ICE would I don't think ICE has right now, or at least the current people within ICE has right now. Set up all asylum processes outside of the country and set up and through vetting systems. And once they are in a country, subsidy should be legitimately minimal, and criminal accountability should be maximal. Well, should states be able to have the power not to allow ICE into their state after Minneapolis? I wouldn't think I'll go that far. Probably not. No. I think you probably have to let the federal government engage in activities that like it has some federal authority to do. We already had this with sanctuary city. Well, sanctuary cities don't stop ICE from going into your city. They just mean that, you know, I don't think that's what sanctuary cities were. Yeah. It just means that the local / state police department doesn't willingly, voluntarily hand over certain information to ICE without like being prompted to do so, right? Like, just means like they don't check for citizenship if you're making certain. They just don't work with the feds. Yeah, doesn't mean the feds can't go in. Like they have the authority to go in. Like when Greg Abbott was not allowing Customs and Border Patrol to to cut down certain barbed wire or to get into Shelby Park. Like that was not legal, right? Greg Abbott can't just do that. The federal government has the authority there. They have to be able to get access to those areas. And Greg Abbott was just kind of not doing that. Just kind of, you know, little minor goof there. I think we should get rid of asylum system and replace it with the actual low-skilled labor system like Singapore. I mean, I think optimally, well, I wouldn't say no. Obviously, there are people who legitimately want to claim asylum, and there should be some process for that. Optimally, I agree that if you're coming here primarily for economic benefits, we should have a system where that's clearly the reason that you're coming here. But that's not the system we have. So if I'm talking about the issues I think we have, or you know, the fault of Biden versus other factors and such, like I'm gonna obviously be referencing the asylum system and such that we have. What is the federal government? What's enforcing immigration policy? What's unconstitutional? Should the states have the power to not allow ICE in their states and arrest them if they are trying to enforce the laws? Supremacy clause, baby. States can't just do anything about it. Yeah, like states can't. When you say it is unconstitutional, if it is unconstitutional, the federal government doesn't have the authority to do it, and ideally, the mechanism for them not doing it is not going to be the states, like fighting them on it in a more physical sense or whatever. It should be, you know, the Supreme Court or some other federal courts having rulings on it, and the executive branch having to obey those rulings. Supremacy clause means the Constitution is supreme and trumps an unconstitutional federal law, void ab initio. The standard leftist response to right-wing complaints about asylum has been, well, then hire more immigrant judges to handle the backlog. Doing so would result in a lot of hearings getting moved up. So accelerating asylum hearings cannot be per se objectionable. I think certainly you probably have to we should reform our asylum laws, but I don't know how else you would deal with the backlog of the current 1 million plus pending asylum cases in a humane way, other than you probably have to hire more judges and get through the backlog. But you should, I mean, maybe do you think I wouldn't be 100% opposed to the idea that maybe that's only a net benefit, given that you also make it harder for new asylees to come. Unpopular opinion. I think we should leave Cuba alone. It costs too much to keep blockading them. Does it really? How much is it cost us because we don't like blockade them. We like sanction them and such, but it's not like we have ships fucking inspecting Russian boats that are going there anymore. And if we destroy Cuba's economic system, we have a responsibility to them after. I mean, I think the blockade, embargo, whatever in Cuba is not that good, but we're really close to actual immigration reform before 2024 election. But Trump told Republicans to block. I mean, that wasn't very that was not as expansive reform I would have liked, at least. That wasn't like substantial reform. But yeah, of course, obviously, just open a border to Cuban refugees. Well, if they make it here, they can stay here, right? I'm very, very pro-immigration. I have no desire to deport almost any of these people, but a huge point of divergence between me and most of the pro-immigration commentaries that I think enforcing these laws is unwise, often useless, sometimes even cruel, but not unjust. Okay, I might be confused what your conception of unjust is then.
Respect of various things, such as the facets of our constitutional republic.
There was indeed something.
American citizens' ability to voice their vote to elect the leader they want. On J6, I think we saw an attack on all of these systems from Donald Trump.
Yeah, viewers.
Like the outcome of the election, he then tried to install false votes for himself in Congress just to steal it, to rig the outcome of the election, to go against the voice of the vote of the people, on top of asking the head of the DOJ, Bill Barr, to falsely announce evidence of widespread voter fraud when there wasn't any. And these core institutions, like our democracy, like our press, and many other aspects, are all things that Donald Trump has attacked and eroded over the years. And in consideration of these facts, I'd say he's absolutely destroyed the political system in which should govern over us.
I would say that Trump didn't destroy American politics, Dean, as much as he revealed.
If someone has an asylum claim that would, if adjudicated, be rejected, then they are here. Then they are only here legally in the same sense that a guilty but not yet convicted person is not a criminal. I think the issue is those people probably in most cases like aren't deportable, or at least like easily deportable. There are obviously circumstances in which you can deport them or whatever. And a lot of people, I think, obfuscate. Or equivocate. I think equivocate is the word. They equivocate between the violent, horrible illegal immigrants, like come here that are like known gotaways and evade border patrol, versus the people who come here and are awaiting an asylum hearing. Many of them, if not most of them, have work authorization. I think there's just a lot of equivocation between those two things, and that's it. And you get like insane claims about there being 20 million illegal immigrants here or whatever.
Just how inherently corrupt the system already is. I think when you look at the history of the United States of America, politics has unfortunately always been corrupt. January 6th was, first of all, morally reprehensible. There was never any reason or any justification for his
Okay. At least we got that.
Followers and his peons to assault the U.S. Capitol. But
we don't place any blame on Trump, okay? Because he had nothing to do with it.
Politics was destroyed well before January 6th. We look at the ruling of Citizens United that allows corporations to purchase.
Oh my God! No way! That's the way. That's really, really, really. First of all, I understand this dude, I guess, is like apparently is probably some more populist dude or whatever. But like that was the result of Republican judges and such, right? Or conservative judges. I mean, obviously it was a majority opinion, but Citizens United is basically Jan 6. You see. That's the deep state that's on. I mean, he said it before. Donald Trump more exposed how broken the political system already is. Like he's clearly insinuating. I think that there's like some corrupt deep state, corrupt corporate establishment, yada yada yada, and that's why he's doing this. Oh my God, bro. Ain't no way. Citizens United was not even. I don't know if there's good data on like how actually. I don't know how you would even identify this, to be fair, but like how actually impactful it was on a federal level. We have some evidence on how impactful it was on a state level, and it seems to have led to more political turnover, but it didn't actually. Haven't heard this kind of retarded talking point. You hear new points of view every day. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've heard. There's a segment of MAGA people who do that. Like it's the same reason a lot of them hate like big pharma, right? Like that used to kind of not be a Republican thing, but like a lot of people now are. Hate big pharma. There's a lot of Republicans who like will agree with like leftists on a lot of like healthcare adjacent issues because they think that all the big healthcare companies are corrupt and such. Kill me. But it seems like Citizens United on the state level increased political turnover between the parties, but it didn't really benefit one party over another. It also led to just like pro-growth reform that benefited like both capital and labor. So it doesn't seem to be like substantially clear that the overall impact was that bad. I'm more conflicted about the more recent ruling that removed the like personal or removed the personal donation caps, right? Because they also did that. That I think you might have reason to believe will lead to worse outcomes than Citizens United. The Democrats are like January 6th times 1,000. Like January 6th, and you still vote for them. Let that sink in. I don't actually think there's anything comparable to January 6th that Democrats have done in the recent past. I don't know. I just don't think that's true.
You look at the fact that George Bush, with the Patriot Act, gave the United States federal government illegal wiretapping capabilities to spy on American citizens.
Oh my God.
It was already fractured. It was already broken.
Kill me.
Trump simply is the latest iteration of an already broken and shattered political system. While Donald Trump...
Wow, true. And there's nothing like unique Donald Trump has done that kind of contradicts that. Like, you know, for example, maybe something Dean mentioned, like January 6th. Some other institutional norms that are broken down. Is that YouTube chatter rage baiting or is he serious? I mean, I'm assuming he's serious. Day 1 of 2020 George Floyd riots. We're beyond January 6th by 1,000. If you want to join a Discord server, ! Discord in the chat and talk about it, you know, we can. I don't think that's a very serious thing. Like January 6,000. Let that sink in.
Been the last in the long line of shitty politicians that have sold out Americans. He is the lighter to the firework. He's the lighter to the bomb, the ignition, to the gun, whatever you want to call it. Those structural inadequacies existed long before Donald Trump, but he took advantage of it.
And I don't know that it destroyed it, because remember, even when he first ran for office, when he was asked about the tax code that the rich often take advantage of, and he said, do you take advantage of the tax code? Of course I do. Of course I do. And so do all of Clinton's donors. And so why didn't you change it when you were in secretary? The thing about it is this, Dean.
How do we get here from January 6th, bro? Now we're talking about tax evasions. The political system was broken before because corporations could already avoid all the taxes.
Power protects itself. So I'm going to argue that power in and of itself tends toward corruption when human beings are in control of it for such extended periods of time, like the Bush dynasty, like the possible malforging Trump dynasty. But I can't place that blame.
Possible malforging Trump dynasty, bro. Oh my god. Why? That's obviously like you can have some blame for the individuals who do corrupt action still, even if you think it's like some natural tendency of power or whatever. But I would like a response to kind of Dean's point that, I mean, he didn't like expressly say it was unique because he hasn't responded to this or whatever. Clearly there are things that Trump has done that are kind of unique in that sense. There are obviously ways in which you might think other previous administrations were corrupt or to some degree, but there's not really been a president in modern history who has done things like the meme coin, who have done things like January 6th, who have done things like even within January 6th, the stuff with the DOJ and the modern day political prosecutions of people. Make politics boring again. These people are insufferable. Indeed.
Solely on the 45th, 47th president of the United States, Dean.
Well, let's see. I actually think that we agree on a lot. So I'm not saying that the American political system was perfect before January 22nd of 2017, or else I'd be saying that the groundwork for the American political system born out of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that only allowed rich white men with property to vote was perfect, and that's not true at all. I think that you gave some great examples in modern American history of how
January 6th was lit. We should have one a few times a year to show them who's in charge. And then I told you you seem to be not want to call in or anything, so I don't know what that says about you, but.
System has been attacked, how the political system has been weaponized against we the people, how it's not served to their benefit of we the people. But what I am saying is that we see a unique threat from Donald Trump that we have not seen at any other point in modern American history. Genuinely, the last time we saw a domestic attack on our Constitution to the same scale of what we witnessed on January 6th was the Civil War. Now, if that doesn't count for anything, and this is just another day with more corrupt humans in charge, I just think that you've really lost the plot of, well, what can our public benefiters give to us?
I'm on a microphone right now. I'm watching on my smart fridge. Okay,
people like
sure, everybody.
In New York City who just want to reduce rent, increase wages, make sure that we're living lives with flourishment and meaning and value, rooted within shared communion of relationships with our friends and families. But then on
I mean, we didn't have to, whatever.
the other hand, you have people like Trump who are like, well, the press, we're going to unconstitutionally make people at the Pentagon agree to giving us their content before they publish it so we can revise it. Fuck the press. It's now quote unquote illegal for them to criticize me in the media. Fuck the press. If they criticize my war in Iran, well, then we're going to revoke their media licenses through the FCC. Fuck the courts. They're all rigged against me. We're going to go ahead and fire 500 liberal justices, replace them with my appointees. And I could go on and on all day.
Okay, are we gonna get Russiagate, Biden student loans, Biden open border, maybe.
The point is that you couldn't go on and on all day for really any other politician in modern American history to that same extent. And that's
Maybe Hunter Biden even.
say that he has destroyed the American political system.
Well, I think that what has happened is that you have to understand the reason I think you're also able to go on and on is because we live in the social media era. So God only knows how many other additional corrupt actions previous U.S. presidents have committed against the interests of the American people that can be as well documented and as easily stated and rattled off as beautifully as you just did. But again, I mean, I remember the quote of Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I feel like if anything, the corrupt actions are probably more documented because we used to have this concept that like, the executive branch would like comply with like subpoena. First of all, the House would like and Senate would actually like subpoena the executive agencies, and we used to have this like concept that's like the federal government had to like actually comply with those, and we used to have this concept that like the courts would like kind of check the executive branch. These used to kind of be things that existed. Like I think there's we have like a lot of evidence with regards to like January 6th and some stuff. It was in Trump's second term. I don't know if there's been like any. Has there been any subpoenas from Congress? Even during the January 6th stuff, or Trump said he didn't want, or the Russiagate stuff, right? Trump said he didn't want people to comply with the subpoenas.
Who said that presidents are not elected, they're selected. We have multiple instances in this country. And David, I'm sure you can attest.
Okay, hold on. If this is our problem,
the interests of the American people that can be as well documented and as easily stated and rattled off as beautifully as you just did. But again, I mean, I remember the quote of Franklin Delano Roosevelt who said that presidents are not elected, they're selected. We have multiple instances.
That's the problem. I can think of like, someone who tried to like kind of select themselves as president. The courts didn't check the executive branch. The executive branch checks the courts. Believe it or not, they kind of like check it. There's like checks and balances. So they'll have like some check on each other. The courts have no teeth beyond executive branch as they enforce their rulings. Well, technically, aren't like certain contempt rulings or whatever enforceable within the judicial branch? But like, yeah, obviously the executive branch is like, trusted to enforce the law. But Fawn, you ever try the what's your source debate strat against conservatives? Kind of kills the debate if they aren't very well versed, but also very funny how someone to annoy someone was showing that they don't know shit. Yeah, I mean, obviously many of the MAGA people. I feel like I haven't talked to like a MAGA person in a while. I guess Spin City was probably the last one I talked to, like a few weeks ago. But yeah, stuff happens, and it's fun to. This happens even with a bunch of people, but not just MAGA people, but like when I know just based off of what someone says, like what source they're citing, I know if someone says 70% of people are like paycheck to paycheck, they're citing that like payroll.org survey. I know if someone says that like the China shock lost 5.4 million jobs or whatever, I know they're like citing the Robert E. Scott EPI analysis bullshit, and I can call it out in real time. It's fun. It's fun sometimes.
Instances in this country, and David, I'm sure you can attest to this as well, of where we've seen things in our lifetime that have been documented on social media that previous presidents simply didn't have the enhanced scrutiny that we were unable to catch it.
Well, I'm not going to minimize the sentiment of Dean or me or you, just based on the fact that we're not really aware of what went on behind closed doors before the development of like modern technology or cell phones.
Kill me.
Having an issue here is the fact that you're conflating corruption being a persistent trend across.
Like I said, it's like. There's probably two mechanisms actually, which is that one, the standard for a scandal back then, or prior to social media was just like much lower. So JD Vance said recently, like a few days ago, that like, oh, actually, if Watergate happened today, that would be that'd only be like a 12-hour news story, right? So it used to be the case that when certain actions took place behind closed doors, people would actually like care about it more, even if it was a smaller thing, like Watergate. And then two, like I said, I think it's just the case that it was kind of understood that the executive branch had to like behave in a certain way, and like the House had like some obligation to do oversight, and it used to be the case that like parties would actually like be willing to like vote to impeach Nixon, for example. I mean, he resigned beforehand, obviously, but
decades in America, with Donald Trump being a unique threat. They're two very distinct things. Corruption has always been here. Corruption will most likely always be here unless we elect Democrats. Every single general, I'm just joking. But it's important to recognize that Donald Trump himself, to the point that Dean made, poses a unique threat. America, at its very foundation, is democracy. It's anti-majoritarian institutions. It's the rule of law, stated rights. Donald Trump has managed to, in the span of 1 year, attack that so many goddamn times that Dean...
What ours miss is the reason that we have most successful assimilationist mechanisms in the world is because of the work they did in the past to set up these individualist structures. I mean, I don't know the truth of that. There's probably other, obviously, I don't know how you would even test that, because there's going to be like too many. There's not going to be like substantial variations in counties between how like individualist or whatever they are, and between countries. I don't know exactly what you could do to test that without having just pretty substantial like reverse causality issues, sample bias issues, endogeneity issues.
And I can probably list this shit off for hours. Along with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Politico recently released a study on this. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has lost 10,000 times in the courts in 1 year. Record number of deaths in ICE custody. Record number of detention centers being shut down. Hundreds of people.
But they're gonna make some mistakes when they are deporting 20 billion people. Don't you know all their jobs have gone to native-born citizens now? And
sent to labor camps and some other with no due process. No president's doing that. No president's attacking democracy at the same time, trying to federalize elections twice in 1 year, trying to rewrite the Constitution once via executive order. These things are unprecedented. We can all agree corruption is wrong. We need to get rid of corruption.
have you heard that? Yes, I've heard this quote. I'm just saying, it's my understanding. If I look this up, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be proven right that there are actions within that, like that a judicial branch can itself enforce contempt rulings. Right? If I look up judicial branch able to enforce contempt rulings, aren't they able to? The judicial branch possesses the inherent legal authority to issue contempt rulings, but it fundamentally relies on the executive branch. I believe there are. I could be mistaken, but I believe there are cases where is technically some executive authority of the judicial branch to enforce. I thought contempt rulings, but it might not be contempt rulings. Assimilation has no effects on immigration. Each one alternative. More individual societies exhibit higher rates of immigration assimilation. But how would you? But you're not going to know the causal impact of that, right? How would you do it? It has no police force. I don't know the exact. I mean, there are court martials. But obviously, any system is predicated on like actors behaving in good faith, right? So they literally do go to his own police force. Like, yeah, like. Well, no, am I mistaken? I feel like there's something I'm thinking of that I remember because people are talking about it in the I just hit my hand on the table in the fucking Boasberg case that there are certain rulings. I thought it was contempt of court things, but I could be wrong. That the judicial branch does have some ability to enforce in its own right without the use of the executive branch. Your Google proved me right that they depend on the executive branch to actually enforce it. Like, I mean, the Google Gemini summary, like I said, I thought it was, I could be thinking of someone else. But people were talking about, I remember this discussion happening in the Boasberg case. Just security. Well, it's the same without the marshals, but you make within origin across destination comparisons instead of comparing immigrants from different places, compare immigrants from the same origin country living in different destination countries. Then make panel data with fixed effects. Okay. Sure. It was intentionally designed. Yes, it was intentionally designed to have checks and balances. Century ago, in the United States peace ship, the Supreme Court held a Tennessee sheriff and 5 others in contempt for lynching Ed Johnson, a man who the execution the court had stayed pending appeal and whose conviction was later posthumously overturned. In an extraordinary move, the Supreme Court initiated its own contempt proceedings, the only time it has ever conducted a contempt trial. It held ships and the others accountable, reaffirming that its authority must be respected even in the face of violent defiance. Ship established that unless and until the Supreme Court issues a judgment declining jurisdiction or without regard to the court's lower jurisdiction, the Supreme Court has authority to make orders to preserve the status quo. Though the Supreme Court's contempt proceedings in Ship did not involve federal officials, the court nonetheless confirmed its authority to police, enforce, and ensure compliance with its own interim orders, regardless of its ultimate holdings on a jurisdictional basis for those decisions. Well.
But Donald Trump is probably the living.
I mean, YouTube Reader could have a point. Checks and balances only work if the three branches acting in good faith. Yeah. If not, the checks don't really exist. But I feel like, are you literally just localist? Are you? I don't think he's localist, but he could just be localist or whatever. Because I've had so many conversations with localists about the same point. You know.
Embodiment of corruption.
Well, if that's true, I mean, let's assume for a second that I agree with that statement. I'm going to pose this question to you, Dean. If what you guys are saying is true and he's the one that destroyed American politics, my question would be, why would 77 million Americans vote for him? Secondly, why have we not 25th Amendment his ass like Alex Jones is now calling for example? And why has he not been impeached again?
Sure. For your first question, are you a flat earther?
You said, am I flat earther? No, I'm not a flat
And
earther.
why did 90% of humans for all of human history think that the earth was flat? I think that giving me the argument that because a lot of people voted for him in the election, what me and David are saying must be false, is a fallacy. Listen, I think the main reason why a lot of people voted for him has to do with propaganda, has to do with the fact that admittedly the economy was absolutely destroyed by the pandemic, and admittedly the Biden-Harris administration simply did not do good enough at getting that message across the line, allowing Donald Trump and all of his buddies to hop from news station to news station to news station saying that it's his fault. Meanwhile, Biden was passing great domestic policy helping us and maybe eating his chocolate ice cream cones after taking a Sunday nap, right? They didn't do good with messaging. I will admit that. That's why I think a lot of people.
I love Biden. You seen that video of Biden eating ice cream when he says the economy is strong as hell? I love that video.
Voted for him. And that's the one thing Trump is really good at.
What a coping talking point. What do you, I feel like he's obviously a TikTok, a Democrat, like partisan dude, like, you know, he's Dean Withers. Okay. So maybe I'm grading him on a curve based on the Dean, knowing he's Dean Withers. But I do think it's true that a big reason why Trump won was like the concern over affordability, and Democrats just did not do a great job at messaging on that. In fairness, it's hard for them to do so, but you know.
Is convincing so many people of a lie. Somehow he's convinced 77 million Americans that the best future course of action, or I guess what is now the past course of action, is to illegally tax.
He's still talking about SCOTUS. Yeah, he's
out
just
of us, costing us 92.
He's doing his thing.
Tariffs. Now convincing Americans that the best course of action is to rip up an agreement with Iran that prevented them from building a nuke, just to then justify going to war with Iran to prevent them from building a nuke. Listen, like I said, in short, answer to your question is propaganda. What was your second question?
Why has no one 25th Amendment his ass? And why has steps not been taken to impeach him? This is the only president in my lifetime that has been impeached twice and acquitted twice.
It's because of the study.
Oh my God.
100% of Republicans that have supported Donald Trump have been found to be lacking spine.
True. Does he know the only reason people didn't vote to impeach him the second time was because the fact that Mitch McConnell, the other Republican, thought that he couldn't do it after Trump's term ended?
There's a really clear reason why it hasn't been 25th Amendment. Okay, because keep in mind,
or at least said it. Trump's tariff policy isn't bad. They're just messaging poorly. That's why we're unpopular. I think that tariff policies are just factually bad. So number one, like Dean did say, like Biden was passing like great domestic policy and such and such and such, and like obviously I would have some disagreements with how good like the American Rescue Plan was and how good certain other packages were, right? So like they are gonna have some disagreement. But he said the reason that people like voted for Trump is in large part because of like the economy and affordability concerns, and the Democrats didn't do a good job at messaging there. I think that is largely the case. I think that a lot of it, that is just true. Now you can say Democrats were partially responsible for creating the affordability problems via the American Rescue Plan. I don't have a ton of disagreement with that. Like I think, the American Rescue Plan contributed some non-negligible amount to inflation, but I also think that like it is just descriptively true that the Democrats didn't do a good job of messaging on it. Well, Trump was in a better position to do so, and won because voters were upset about the economy. Or at least that's a significant part of it. Obviously, immigration concerns, et cetera, too. The reason for voter Trump has nothing to do with positive or negative messaging, in my opinion. You think the reason people like are saying, so I think the reason people voted for Trump was in large part because they viewed him as like better for the economy. Some of that was just always going to be the case because of the current position the economy was in for many of them, right? But I do think part of it was, and I feel like you have appealed to this before, is that Democrats, I think, did do not a great job at messaging about the economy. I don't know what would have been better necessarily, and I think especially Kamala Harris was in a hard position to do certain things. But like even the talk of the talk of the vibe session, right? Haven't you complained before that like all these Democrat elite people were like talking about the vibe session, and like you think that it's like bad messaging? Like I think that had something to do with it.
From inside, that's going to be done by the cabinet. Donald Trump was very
just better messaging is blasting up bullshit 24/7 and Elon buying X, which also blasted bullshit into Americans' brains. We should have just gotten liberal version of Grok, bro. That's all we need. Most people don't really make voting decisions off of what political apparatus tells them. They vote based on whether they're incumbent. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it too. I think it is also the case of Democrat. Like, and I feel like you've talked about this too, that you think Democrats also did a bad job at messaging about the economy. I don't think it makes them. Again, the point was they're talking about like why if Trump is so bad, why did so many people vote for him? Like it's just a descriptive claim about why people felt they needed to vote for Trump.
Intentional with his selection of cabinet members for his second administration because he learned something valuable about that from his first. In his first term, he picked people that just kind of liked him or maybe on board with his plan, maybe on board with a policy that he shared to the American people. He didn't necessarily pick devout loyalists that would be willing to go to the ends of the earth to defend him. That's why Mike Pence was, on blast on J6 while all the Trump supporters scream and hang him, because Mike Pence wouldn't place Trump above the Constitution. And that's probably one of the largest losses in Donald Trump's life. So for the second term, he took a different approach. He took a different angle. This time he made sure to install cabinet nominees who would be willing to take it that extra mile.
Americans wanted Democrats, and majority, I think, I don't know, like, I don't even know how, exactly what type of evidence would really, like, change my mind in some of these things or whatever, but, like, I blame the Democrats to some degree for not having good messaging, but I do think they were just in a much worse position to begin with that, like, I don't know if any amount of, like, good messaging would have been enough, and I don't know exactly what the better messaging would have looked like.
Whatever he wants. Don't trust me. Trust.
Do you know the bread and peace model? No, don't believe so.
Pam Bondi, the person who was willing to personally refuse to release 3 million of the Epstein files and redact his name over 1 million times in violation of the law just because it's what he wanted. And that same reason is why he hasn't been 25th Amendment. I think Donald Trump could wake up tomorrow and threaten to genocide 60 million people, attack the Pope, and praise Allah on Easter, and they still went 25th Amendment his ass. Oh, wait, he already did.
Well, Dean, again, and there's a third part to that question, which is why has he not been impeached and removed from office? This is the only president.
Because of the Republican majority. I mean, listen, they care about what? Their own careers. They care about their own income. They care about their own money. They obviously don't care about their constituents, or they wouldn't be Republicans. And what helps their career right now? Being a loyalist to Trump, because those who...
I mean, what if the second time if if his term wasn't over, like at least if you believe Mitch McConnell's like excuse, who knows if he actually would have really been willing to vote to impeach if that wasn't the case.
Well, she got kicked out of Congress. Thomas Massie, well, he got kicked out of Congress. Nancy Mace, well, she got her clean water bill killed. It legitimately and materially hurts Republicans to be anti-Trump, and in many scenarios, even in the last year and a half, has ended their political careers as a whole. Which, by the way, going back to the first question, or I guess the thesis of our time here, how has Donald Trump destroyed the American political system? Well, this is a pretty damn compelling way. I
find disagree how Democrats are supposed to compete with fascist / Russian boss as Elon. I mean, like I said, I think they were in a worse position to begin with. So I don't know. I don't know if it would have been enough. Russian bots, Elon, Fox News, and all the lies. How could they have been? How much better could they have been? I don't know how significant I would say. Can you explain why 80% of the variation in U.S. presidential vote shares with just you can explain 80% of the variation in U.S. presidential vote shares with just recent disposable incomes and military deaths overseas. I mean, yeah, not surprising.
Heard a Democratic president in my lifetime argue that the worst congressman in our country's history is the one who argued that pedophiles should be held accountable and push them out of Congress. But that's just my 2 cents.
You're referencing his quotation on Thomas Massie, which I disagree with him vehemently on. I would simply respond to that by saying, when I look at corruption, once again, because that's what this is essentially all about, I think that Trump won in 2016 because most Americans believed that the system was corrupt. And let's be honest, Trump ran on a populist platform that said he was going to drain the swamp. He used the rhetoric. I can say now, Dean, I'll give you that.
How much is responsive to what he said, though?
Some of it was propaganda because of the way he handled the Epstein files, because of the way he handled the Iran war.
Oh my God, bro. True. Trump's actually the most corrupt president because he's the only one that has refused to release the Epstein file. That's my new argument. Okay.
spoke to a truth that existed long before him. I can't say he destroyed American politics. I'm going to argue it was already destroyed, which is what he weaponized to get himself into office. That has nothing to do with him. That has to do with the fact that he saw a weakness in the American political system that allowed him to slide his way right into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So before we blame and say that Trump destroyed it, we got to look at the fact that he took advantage of an already destroyed system to set himself up in this position of power.
And I think that this was the same point that you were making earlier that I agreed with to an extent. The American political system isn't perfect, and it's never been perfect. As we went over earlier, it was built on the notion that only rich white men should be able to vote. It took women, over 100 years to get the right to vote themselves, and even longer to get the right to report rape and marriage. I mean, we've witnessed historical oppression of marginalized groups, preventing them from voting, preventing them from living a flourish lifestyle, all because of the weaknesses and the downfalls of the American political system. 110%. The reason why I say that Donald Trump destroyed it is not to say that nobody's damaged it before, is not to say that every president before him is perfect, but it's rather to say, as was pointed out earlier, that he is a very unique threat, and he embodies all the characteristics that I think you have shared and could share about the impacts and the threats and the damage done to our system in the past. And he represents everything that could go wrong, because it is in every identifiable sense, as it relates to his attacks on the Constitution, his attacks on law outside of the Constitution, calling for the execution of Democrats, and everything else we've spent our time talking about. He is a unique threat, which is why I say that he has destroyed the system, even though it has been stress tested, damaged, hurt, and maybe even destroyed at other times in the past.
So then let me, to close this out, Dan, I'm going to force an interesting question on you here. What would it take for you to recant the statement that Trump, what would he have to do for you to recant the statement?
Why, bro? Why?
He's destroyed American politics.
Turn into Joe Biden. I'm joking.
How is any of this responsive? What are we doing? What are we doing here? This is the best they could get for a conservative on whatever new show they're doing.
Well, I mean, I think that question hinges on the pre-assumption that there is something that he could do to recant that. And I feel like that's a pre-assumption I'm not willing to make.
So you're 100% bought and sold. He's destroyed it. There's no path that he could take to earn back some modicum of your respect.
No.
Dean, I want to say thank you for coming on. This was a hell of a conversation, and we're definitely going to have to do.
Incredible. Okay. I don't know if I care about the rest of the stuff. Hot takes. I don't know. Maybe I say something stupid here. Die peacefully of natural causes. Yeah, die, at 80 years old with a loving wife and kids, by your side. Just maybe stop making the content now. Just maybe stop that part now.
Earn it. And at the end of the day, if unpaid labor was done in this country for 244 years, I'm going to say that the nation has a debt that it still hasn't cleared. Period. Point blank.
Well,
it's a debt owed.
100%. 100%. But simply, in what system should we do those things and pass that policy? But yeah, if you're a communist, please don't hate me. The drip's crazy. Listen, Mao Zedong had sauce, but not enough sauce.
Oh my God.
Congress.
The Nazis did know how to dress. I'll give the pricks that much. They did at least know how to dress and put on a good suit.
Incredible stuff here.
The lack of a man and a woman and a mother and a father and all of this, it manifests. And if there's can do a lot of harm and bring a lot of disease, by all means, I recognize those things as being true. But in America, we need a politics that is more than just picking one group, picking an external locus to bully and blame for every single one of your inconveniences. The Republican Party does.
True. I looked through the split takes earlier. I didn't watch it, but I clicked through to see what they were. None of them seemed particularly interesting to me. So I just wanted to see. I wanted to see what it was like. Okay, quick meme that's gonna make me angry. America having some in healthcare and some populist econ stuff. I think based on what I'm looking at in the chapters.
Democrats, with respect, we have to recognize we cannot continue to do what we've done and expect a different result. So democratizing the economy seems to me the same fight as saving our democracy.
Gavin Newsom, pro-worker co-ops.
Let's stop talking about resistance, which Mark Elias in your opening suggests he doesn't even like the word anyway, which is interesting, which I appreciate, and focus more on renewal. But where are you just this notion of democratizing the economy, more radically thinking about, obviously $7.25 minimum wage in 20 states, that's an insanity. Yeah. That still persists and exists. Tax codes, we have debates out here on wealth taxes, death taxes, state taxes, stepped up basis. Where are you in all that thinking? I mean, how should we be thinking, Democrats, about tax policy, about modernizing this economy to make it work for more folks? I mean,
oh no, I feel like I haven't seen Brian Tyler Cohen give that many strict econ takes before. I've seen him, be broadly progressive-ish when it comes to supporting a lot of Biden's econ policy. And I don't know. I think he's more of a Bernie Warren guy. I believe so, but I could be wrong. No one wants Newsom to Californify America. Brian looks different. Haven't watched him, but yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, when the fuck did he get hot? I saw this, and yeah, he grew his beard out and grew his hair longer.
You look at when this country was most prosperous. We had sky high top marginal.
Oh my God! No! No! Oh, what are you doing? Kill me! 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 Kill me!
Tax rates. You look at, it's the great irony of Trump using the Make America.
So, those of you who don't know, number one, just because these two things coincided. Obviously, I mean, they cause each other. The counterfactual could be higher. It could have been higher growth absent those things. Number two, the top marginal tax rates are just a pretty misleading way of looking at things, because the actual effective rate was much lower and has not substantially changed, even according to like the highest estimates from Piketty, Syed, Zuckman. Even though the top marginal rates in the 60s were, you know, like something like 94%, I think is the highest it ever got on like the very top marginal bracket. The actual effective rate was like closer to 45% according to their work, and it's like at 35% today for like the top 1%, right? Like this is not a the marginal rates are misleading because there are a lot of avoidance strategies, or just keeping your money within your private company as opposed to taking it as personal income that, you know, limited the how high the effective rate actually was.
Great again slogan is like
The percent of revenue they have raised over time has been like semi-stable as well. It kind of goes up and down more, but
when you think about the era that he wants to harken back to, it's an era of like the 50s and 1950s.
Yeah.
Like what was the top marginal tax rate in the 1950s?
70+%,
Right,
80 some
right.
days.
Where am I? Do I have... Look at the graphs. Look at the graphs. It's not the case. This is Piketty, Simon, Zuckman. This is David Splinter's work, and obviously David Splinter and Joe Dalton have kind of the most favorable estimates in this case or whatever. But even if you want to look at Simon, Zuckman, okay, it's not the case effective rates were that high, and this is how much revenue they've raised over time as a percentage of GDP. It's not substantially. It's not really any higher or lower, although it's obviously a little spiky.
And so, you know, that's like this notion that we need to be heaping tax cuts onto corporations that are making record profits, and gutting the highest marginal tax rates, and starving us of federal tax revenue so that we can gut all of the programs that people rely on to survive. This is not a healthier America.
I mean, I just showed the graph for revenue that the personal income taxes were raising, right?
Had in the past, and I think it's directly correlated to the fact that we are not that we're not offering services to our own people. I mean, this isn't rocket science. You look at the happiest countries in the survive. This is not a healthier America than we've had in the past, and I think it's directly correlated to the fact that we are not that we're not offering services to our own people. I mean, this isn't
But we didn't have those programs in the past either. Most they've been like somewhat like stagnant in terms of real spending or spending as a percentage of GDP, but like social spending as a percentage of GDP overall has gone up. We didn't cut the programs
the happiest
enough.
countries in the world, and those are countries that adequately tax their citizens and have budgets.
Whoa! Everyone in Finland is so happy. Wow!
Taxing their
And I'm gonna sleep now. See you next time, Fawn. I appreciate you stopping by, Mio.
citizens so that they can dump that money into the glut of the federal reserves that won't work for its own people, or just heap more money into the military industrial complex or whatever projects Trump and Republicans are engaged in right now that don't actually help regular people. So it's an all the above approach, but I think it starts. I mean, look, California is a good example of a progressive tax structure. I know that you've spoken at length, including I think you did a great job in your debate against both Ron DeSantis and Sean Hannity on Fox News, where you explain to them what a progressive tax structure is and how it's different from what they have in Texas and Florida.
The most regressive two tax states in America that tax their low-wage workers more than we tax our high-wage workers.
Right.
So again,
God, I feel like I remember that. Looking into that when that Ron DeSantis debate happened. Oh God, fuck me. I don't remember how true that is. I don't care right now.
simple question: who is the high tax state? Who are you for? This notion of Medicare for all, I want to go back to because I think it's so important.
Yeah.
It's inevitable from my perspective. It's just the economics, it just doesn't work. As a private sector guy, I've got a bunch of private employees.
Really, Econ 101, healthcare. Private healthcare just doesn't work. Inelastic demand.
I mean, as a business, it's not working. Obviously, you look at the cost growth in government and Medicaid debates, we're having Medicare.
And the outcomes.
So
obviously, tax and consumption over income will be more regressive. That's not the point of it. But I don't even know if it's the case, because you should obviously look at effective rates. But yeah, it could be the case. I kind of doubt that the effective rates are substantially higher. And maybe I guess the transfers, I would guess, are a lot higher in California as opposed to Texas and such. So maybe that could be the case.
we want to be. The challenge is, and this is the challenge, is purely one of pragmatic political reality, and you're back to being a pragmatic progressive, which I like as well, that frame. How the hell do you do it without taking something away that people have come to enjoy for generations, and that's their private health insurance?
Yeah. Look, I think maybe you have a transition period, but I think half of the battle is selling it, and I think that you have to be ready to pounce because you have a Republican Party that has every tool at their disposal to be able to frame something as in any way they want to. I mean, they framed Obamacare, which is one of the most popular pieces of so popular that Republicans with full control of government and zero respect for any institutions still can't make Obamacare go away.
Yeah.
You know, they tried 77 times to overturn Obamacare to repeal it.
But in a week or so, Trump's coming out with a new plan, right?
Well, that's
next week,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Excuse
me. I don't
yeah.
want to be unfair.
So,
I want to correct that because I don't want to end up on your list, which we'll get to at the end of our podcast in a moment.
So I think that you have to be ready to sell this thing. But look, I think at its core, people recognize in a way that I don't think they did back in 2010 the failures of our healthcare system, especially with the advent of social media. There are just literally endless examples of this healthcare system failing Americans.
Yep.
And the amount that we pay, the outcomes that we get, the brokenness of and the predatory nature of health insurance companies. I mean, all of it is so well known that I think that we're in a moment where, different from 2010, there is not this.
It's just the same. It's all. I can't even. There's not much I can say because we're not saying anything particularly specific.
Nostalgia or this blind deference to the status quo. And so, will there be pushback? Absolutely, but in very much the same way that Medicare is likely the most popular social program in the United States. Obamacare, one of the most popular. So, like these programs where there are reforms to make healthcare more accessible. If past this prologue, we have a lot to learn from moving in that direction. But again, I think you have an entire generation of people for whom adequate healthcare is so out of reach that we need a radical change in that arena. You know,
an entire generation of people for whom adequate healthcare is just out of reach. I can see the case for saying for people adequate healthcare is out of reach for, like, just having an affordability concern. I haven't heard people talking about just a generational effect. I think it's if you look at it, probably as a percent of income, Gen Z spends more in healthcare than they're in real terms than their parents did at the same age. I don't know if we have good data on that. I bet you have to go through. You'd have to disaggregate some of the stuff we have. I don't know how far health spending data goes back, but I think that's true. Why don't you assume that using monopoly power to push prices down produces direct welfare gains? Who knows?
you know, look, this is life or death, literally. Yeah. And I think people are ready for it in a way that they weren't in the past. I'm curious your vantage. I mean, you know, you were around in 2010. You were. What do you think? What do you think today looks like versus when Obamacare first came onto the scene?
Well, I think more broadly, this is the 30s. This is the 60s. I mean, this is about order of magnitude change. I think we're in sort of tectonic plates of, you know, something profound, and this is at the core of that. And look, I'm a practitioner. My burden has been that I've been accountable to the consequences of our policy decisions, and accountable when I wake up the next day to the voters. And so I'm in the how business. It's so different than a think tank.
Yeah.
I love everybody out there in Congress that have never had an executive role, that have never had the pen, the paper, and accountable to that. But I've also done more in healthcare than any governor in the United States history, period, full stop, not even close. Regardless of pre-existing ability to pay, and regardless of your immigration status, getting pummeled on the right from our expansion for healthcare for those without documentation. And I delivered that when I was mayor, not just as governor of California. I promoted it, and I'm consistent. I lived up to my word. As imperfect as the system is, we also have done a lot in the single payer financing framework with $11 insulin, not subsidizing costs, but lowering costs, doing a lot to address.
Not subsidizing costs, but lowering cost. By that, you mean just strict price control? Like
right, from our expansion for healthcare for those without documentation. And I delivered that when I was mayor, not just as governor of California. I promoted it, and I'm consistent. I lived up to my word. As imperfect as the system is, we also have done a lot in the single payer financing framework with $11 insulin, not subsidizing costs, but lowering costs, doing a lot to address cost escalation with a new Office of Healthcare Affordability and numeric goals, and more transparency in the space, et cetera. I don't want to belabor the point, but again, when I think of the tectonic plate on Medicare for all and how you actually implement something of that consequence, I'm back into the political pragmatism of it and how you can sell it. And that goes, and forgive me, I'm answering
okay, great,
your question by challenging you and getting back on track on the point you make about how you sell it and how it's communicated in a world of Brendan Carr's FCC.
Yeah.
True. Wow. All right, we're watching.
It didn't happen.
Putting this on.
Yes, here today to talk about it.
Where is my fucking thing? And I'm playing fucking, what should I play? I don't know. But this is the rent control debate or whatever. I think we might not have been able to find many people for it. It's only Saxium's Hunter versus, I'm pretty sure it's just a random Discord guy who's for rent control. So we'll suffer through with some of this.
I'm going to give the mic to them to introduce themselves, tell the people who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you, and your thoughts on the subject. And since it's just the two of you, I'm going to allow you extra time, so take all the time you need. I'm going to give the mic first to Mr. Magic Sky Wizard. First time on my channel. Glad to see you, buddy. Give us what you got.
Hey, how you doing? So yeah, I'm just a community member in the server. Politically, I consider myself a democratic socialist. And yeah, I'm generally when it comes to this topic, I'm for the rent control position. The reason why it depends on what we're looking at when we're talking about rent control, because what is the rent control trying to solve? And if the question is, what does it solve the housing issue? It doesn't. It's a stopgap measure for stability in the market, so that people aren't pushed out, so that you can keep your core constituents in where they live, where they're born in, and stuff like that. So that's the main goal of this policy. It generally does that good very well. It's not the first time New York has done this as well. They did it back in, I want to say 2016 with Blasio, or was it 2017?
Blasio did it like 3 times, but yeah.
Yeah, he did it 3 freezes under Blasio.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting, but go ahead.
No, you're good. It kind of helps. And so, like, I think, as we can see, it doesn't do too irreparable harm, but the problem is you have to be doing something on the side, and I believe Monami does have a plan to do that in New York.
Well, why don't we just do the good thing? Why don't we just do the good thing? Just do the good thing. Expanding housing supply. Why would we think that? Obviously, it is true that like it reduces internal displacement of those in rent-controlled units. That much is true. But there are obviously other welfare effects that we might care about. You know, for example, it probably limits the ability of people to move in both internally within the city, depending on how it's structured. There are effects of people over consuming housing by nature, having rent controlled units they don't want to give up. And then to the extent you discourage any building of future housing, or simply discourage at least the building of the like desired mix of owner occupied versus rental housing, just going to be concerns about having people limiting people's ability to move in to the city.
According to their HDC website, like, he has planned to try to build at least 400,000 homes in New York and increase supply while this rent control is going on. So the main reason why you want to do this is because, again, you're trying to stabilize the rent so that your lower income workers can still stay in the city. Obviously, you still need police, you still need firefighters. So like that's one of the biggest reasons why this is being implemented.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Yeah. Next up, Mr. Hunter, go ahead.
Hello. So you know me, I'm going to have a long intro, and I'm excited to do it. Okay, rent control, the defining slopulism proposal. Firstly, I understand why people want it. The rent keeps going up, their income doesn't. Just stop the number going up. I understand why it's motivating to people. All we're doing, though, is distracting from the simple reality that it's largely illegal to build houses in America. I've got my little YIMBY Alliance, Build More Homes shirt to represent. So secondly, I'm not just going to talk about why rent control is bad. I hope we can also talk about positive solutions as to how to have rent not just freeze, but lower. Homelessness doubles when housing shifts from 20% to 50% of income. Poverty and homelessness is a policy choice, and there are shifts to ensure that people can live dignified and wealthy lives. I want to constantly reassert that my proposals aren't just disregarding people's needs. I want to upzone and liberalize zoning restrictions, implement land value taxes, create infill exceptions for environmental regulations, and reduce car-centric policies like parking minimums. I don't know why when we talk about temporary solutions, we don't talk about housing vouchers or unconditional cash transfers rather than rent control. But the fact of the matter is that to fix the long-term problems regarding rent, we need more housing. Thirdly, I am also here to talk about why rent control is bad. There are 2 possibilities that can occur from rent control. 1, landlords will find a way to recoup costs. This might mean selling furniture, decreasing repairs, and increasing application costs. They might aggressively increase costs on uncontrolled units that they also own to cover the costs on the controlled ones. The few families who keep their place at a lower cost find themselves trapped, unable to move to the other side of town.
Who is that? The guy talking right now? Hunter Kozak? I think Kozak is his name or whatever. He's Faxiums on Twitter. And I think Instagram. He might be Hunter on Twitter. He was the guy talking to Charlie Kirk when he got shot.
If they found a better job upstate. The second possibility is even worse. They don't find a way to recoup costs. This means that they will exit the housing market or transfer their units to a business complex or non-controlled single-family unit and displace their residents. This also spooks any developer looking to build more housing in the area. Wait times explode and only go to the most privileged buyers. Landlords gain a disproportionate amount of leverage. Misallocation occurs and the poor have nowhere to go. Into the streets they go. I know I'm a dirty, stinky liberal, but fun fact, I do think that housing is a right, and I think we can build a society to make sure that happens. Anyway, I'm Hunter Kozak. Follow me on the places. Wick, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Okay, I guess the floor is your guys, and if I have questions, I'll interrupt and I'll ask my questions. But go ahead.
Okay. Do you want to tackle anything that I mentioned? I can start. I don't know how you want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the questions I have, like, so what historical examples, I mean, that we can point out to that it does lead to more displacement, like you described, and does that situation happen universally, or is it based on the area? Because I just don't think it's historical.
I mean, that San Francisco study, what's her name, Diamond, that study I think did find displacement insofar as landlords converted the rent controlled units into like owner occupied condo units and such, right?
There, but in the New York policy.
For sure. So I can show you a meta-analysis if you want. There were how many 60 different studies that were compiled into this resource I can show you that showed almost universally misallocation occurs, which is essentially gentrification. I can go into what specifically misallocation means, but it really harms poor people and ensures that they don't have a place to live. There are some things that are a little bit more in flux, something like homeownership, which is I'm always kind of worried about. That sounds like it's good that homeownership is increasing, but what that actually means is that these rent stabilized apartments or rent controlled apartments are just getting converted into like single family homes so that they can only support one family rather than like 50. That tends to shift a little bit based off of the specific areas, but mobility decreases and misallocation increases almost unilaterally. Like that's guaranteed. I can send you the study if you want.
Oh yeah, no. So like, like historically within New York, is that the data that shows that? Because we've already mentioned like there's been 2 freezes in New York already. Is that what came about? Because
Why on earth? Why on earth are we only feeling or only care about the evidence specifically if it's in New York? Why would we care about that?
read on it, there wasn't much of that happening. I mean, there were some loopholes that tenants were taking care of, but like there wasn't like a major shift in gentrification or anything like that.
Sure. So yeah, whenever we look at these sorts of issues, it's really hard to control for any specific factors. This is sort of like the nature of economics. It's really hard to control for any specific factors because we don't have a New York in which rent control didn't exist. But it does seem like, given a number of different analyses, I'm actually not exactly sure how these analyses are created, but we can parse through the study if you want. But essentially, it's comparing this to if the rent control didn't pass, that housing wouldn't increase as much. Housing prices wouldn't increase as much. So it's certainly the case that rent control is a muted problem. Like it's not the biggest issue. I'm not saying New York is going to like fall into disrepair and then it's going to explode and that like everyone's. I'm just saying it doesn't fix any issues and it probably makes things worse.
Well I mean, and I agree with that. That's like not the main point of.
These weird econ guys are almost always libertarian or Democrats, nothing in between. He's not a weird econ guy. I mean, he's like citing, obviously some economic stuff here, but I don't think he would call himself an econ guy.
What we're trying to solve with rent control. I mean, it's mainly for stabilization. It is a stopgap measure while you're actually solving the problem. So an example is like currently with this rent freeze.
I feel like I had I totally forgot what I was doing when I logged off of this stupid world last time. I feel like I died and it made me rage quit. And I don't know which death market is because I wasn't deleting them.
Mondomi is doing it with the HTC is that they have a plan to increase homes to about 400,000 within New York. So like I understand like the rent control isn't a solution to the housing problem. It is just a stopgap measure to stop the current residents, the poor population in that region, from being kicked out of their locality. So that way they can continue working their jobs. Like I said earlier, I mean you have firefighters, policemen, emergency services that need to be able to live in the city. And if they can't afford to do that because rents are just getting crazy because it is New York and their housing market is just insane. I found out yesterday it's like $3,000 a month, which I was like, okay, that's crazy to me. But yeah, I mean that's like the biggest reason why rent control is there is not because we're trying to solve the housing problem. We're trying to keep our current residents there while we try to solve that problem.
So I largely agree with you, and I'm obviously going to be in favor of Mamdani's plan to build more housing. Obviously, that's going to be something I'm in favor of. My big issue that I'm going to be having is, firstly, it doesn't seem to actually prevent costs because landlords are going to find some way to recoup these costs nonetheless. They're going to I could look at a couple different things, but you keep saying that I keep pointing to different directions. So I don't know exactly where your issue is, but really what I can say is the worst case scenario is that the residents do actually lose their housing, but it's not because of price. It's because that housing doesn't exist anymore. It gets converted into different properties because it's not profitable to be an apartment anymore because you prevented the profit from occurring.
Well, I mean, we have to realize like not all housing in New York and most places that do rent controls, most of the housing that, so I think it's like 24% of New York that's actually in stabilized housing. That's the only thing this rent freeze occurs. So I mean, the best argument you can really make is that like in that situation, like they may increase the rents a little bit more on their non-rent controlled units.
It certainly does occur, yeah.
And that probably.
And yeah, we have empirical evidence for that. And then you would also expect probably the quality of that housing stock to go down, and there's evidence for that as well. And I think even in like New York, I don't know if there's like causally identified evidence on specifically in New York, but obviously we would expect the effects to be similar. But there are certainly anecdotal examples of that happening in rent stabilized units and in the older strictly rent controlled units.
Will occur, but that probably lessens the bleeding for what rent control is trying to prevent, which is like a mass exodus over like a shortfall.
And then there was some lawsuit like over that relatively recently. It was one of the things that made people say that rent control might violate the fucking takings clause, because there was that lawsuit where I think the government said that I forget the specifics. Easy one, you probably know what I'm talking about though, probably.
Yeah, the issue is that the mass exodus is happening regardless. And I know that there are different factors that can happen, but I just want to hit the point that like very specifically, these units do transfer into single family units, and the tenants of these apartment buildings do get displaced with rent control policies because it's no longer a profitable industry.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I understand that, but like New York exists. They've had stabilized units for years and years now.
Yeah, and people get displaced. It's a very common issue.
Yeah,
because of these rent stabilization and rent control policies, I would say. And it seems like I can send you a lot of these sources, but yeah, I mean, I could go over the very specific issues, like the distinctions between mobility and misallocation. Like misallocation is to me one of the biggest issues. Whatever. I don't know what.
Just for my audience's edification, when you say misallocation, elaborate.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
This is. I'll actually use the example of myself because I'm a pretty good example. My wife and I make probably around like 110, 120K. We're pretty good as a household. So we actually were in a really poor part of town because it was just kind of like the only housing available, and it was way below our means. We didn't really want to live in such a dingy place, and it was very cheap. Now this is what's called misallocation. This place, which is like a 15-minute city that opened up like 20 minutes away from our old place, this opened up, and we're like, let's fucking move there. It's nice. Sure, it's more expensive, but we can accommodate those abilities. We get pushed out of those older places, and now because the demand has dropped in those specific places, rent can now decrease in those locations. So it's a really big problem when you have very wealthy individuals who can sort of just assert control and like push themselves into these like rent stabilized apartments because there's not a really big place. There's not a place for them to go because we don't really focus on like luxury apartments. So they go, okay, well I have to go somewhere. I go into these rent stabilized apartments, and then it pushes all the poor people out because the landlords obviously prefer someone with a higher income.
feel like usually that's not what people mean by misallocation, right? Am I wrong there? But misallocation is usually when people are like his example of kind of under consuming housing, I guess, could be considered misallocation. But usually it's people either like under or over consuming housing, because of the incentives that rent control creates for people. That's literally not misallocation. Yeah.
So like, I mean, that does occur. That also occurs in an unrent-free market, though. Like most,
Yeah, but it's
I mean,
gonna
it's
happen more.
typically, yeah, statistically, like most apartments that get built in city areas tend to be luxury condominiums. Like,
Sorry, what? Say that one more time.
Whoa.
when new tenants or new builders are building, they end up building. They don't want to build low-income housing. They usually tend to,
Well,
especially in free markets, build for richer constituents.
Just be super clear.
I mean, but filtering effect, it still depresses the prices of older housing and now relatively like less quality units as well. Like,
Just to be super clear, that's kind of like it's kind of necessarily has to happen. It's what's called filtering in terms of housing, where if you build a new place that no one's ever lived in, it's necessarily going to be nicer. It's going to be, you can charge more. But like today's luxury apartments are tomorrow's low income apartments, because eventually they're going to get run down, and then the price, hopefully, given a stabilized enough market, will lower down and accommodate for poorer individuals. So I'm not really concerned about high end apartments, because one, it brings in higher income people to lower the demand in places in which it needs. And yeah, I don't know. I think, am I making sense? It feels like there's a reason why kind of every economist is against rent control, and it's kind of just like obviously bad. I guess, and if you want to answer a question, why don't we just do housing vouchers? Why don't we do direct cash transfers? Like, why are we doing rent control?
Just because it makes it more stable. Like also like the funding for that is just, I don't think, especially in most cities, it's not there to do the type
I
of
agree the funding. I agree
need.
the funding isn't there, but essentially what you're doing is you're shifting the burden from the government, who is largely the best place to shift the burden, because usually they can take it. Usually they're able to withstand that, and you're pushing it onto businesses that are 1/3 of all housing are owned by mom and pops. They're usually not going to be able to handle this the burden of not having a profit anymore. Why not shift that to the government?
That's not the case. Like, especially if we're talking about New York, especially not the case right now, because the last 3 years, like they've increased, they've actually had a gain of 30% in their like revenue services, like within renting. So I don't see where they're making a loss. In fact, I mean, this rent control is temporary. It's only 2 years. It's already planned. Like once it ends, they're going to get a 6% increase on.
Sure. If your argument is this isn't that bad, it's not going to explode. Like I said, I don't think this is going to implode New York City, but it's a bad policy that we shouldn't be implementing. And I guess what I'm saying is, if the government doesn't have the revenue to stabilize these apartments, why is Decker so
obsessed with Civil War? No clue.
Be able to, like, some small rinky-dink.
What did he do to say something new about it?
Their business. Why would they be able to withstand that shock in their prices, but the city government couldn't? Like, how we have to recognize, if you don't have the budget, why do you think they would?
Well, because it's spread out among those renters. Not every renter is a mom and pop, like especially in Newark. But also a lot of these stabilized units are also not in the same building. They're in the same building with non-stabilized units. So most of the time, these people.
I'm still that decision of the court was 5-4. Revoking birthright citizenship should mean civil war. I mean, I don't know the factual reason of why he's so obsessed with civil war. I don't know how to answer your question.
And still have
some combination of his genetics and environment has led him to have certain beliefs about how or how the Constitution should be interpreted, and how the appropriate response to a misguided ruling
inside the unit they're in. Just they have a certain apartment units that are only stabilized. So I mean, I don't see like them taking that much of a hit. I mean, if it's temporary, especially if they're going to recoup that cost, and they've already got 30% from the last 3 years during COVID.
Okay, there's a couple things to throw out there. Firstly, I agree that not every housing business is going to be able to, or is not going to withstand the shock. Sorry, I agree that most of these housing businesses are able to withstand the shock, but some of them won't, and some of them are going to go out of business, and they're going to sell their properties, and no one's going to want to get into apartment complexes because it's clearly not profitable, because rent control is stipulated that it's not profitable. So they're going to shift into other burdens. They're going to do different things with the land. Maybe they'll turn it into a restaurant. Maybe they'll turn it into a business. Maybe they'll turn it into a single family home. Anything that's not rent controlled, where the profit is debilitated.
Well, I mean, that would, in my opinion, that would be just like, so I believe in New York, to have stabilized units, you kind of agree to it when you're building the property. That would be short-sighted of the workers there. They don't realize that it costs.
Wait, why? It's more profitable to build a business instead. Just build land that's like a little, one of those like little malls. I forget the name of it, but it's essentially business units that like.
At some point, his constant appeal to civil war makes me think that he just hungers for civil war. He probably does. And Nicholas Decker would be goated during the Civil War, bro. How tall is he? He's not even that tall, right?
Business, just rents a room in there.
Well, I mean, these buildings that also choose.
I want Nicholas Decker on my team, though. Still,
choose again to have the rent stabilized units in their apartment, get a tax write-off. They pay like very little in taxes when they have their stabilized units, so they're also being compensated for that.
Wait. You're I think you're sort of. I don't think you can really have it both ways. Like, is the government able to withstand the shock, or can't they? Like, are they stabilizing the apartment because they can withstand the shock, or are they not?
I mean, yeah, they are, because like that's what I'm trying to say.
Why don't we do housing transfers or housing vouchers? I mean, and the reason why we want to do housing vouchers is that doesn't crimp the profit of It doesn't short the profit of the housing businesses, and when those profits are shorted, then they have to transfer to a different Like they have to shift somewhere else.
Well, they're not losing profit though. I've already like they've increased their revenues 30% in 3 years. That's way above inflation. They're not losing money.
No.
Relative to the counterfactual, obviously, is a concern, and relative to other businesses, other sectors that they could also be getting a return on, or even not different than the I say housing sector, but you know, they can shift from the residential housing sector to office space, et cetera, if that property is not controlled.
But rent control stipulates they lose money, right? That's legally they have to lose money. That's what it's saying.
No, that's not like not necessarily like. Especially it depends on how much their costs are. If their costs are lower than even like if they're just so if I own a house and like I rent it out and the market's brought market up where I can just charge $2,000, my cost has increased.
Just to kind of maybe bridge the gap and translate, what Hunter is saying is that they are not allowed to make past a certain point. So any unrealized profit that they could have made past that certain point, they will lose out on because of the rent control. So in that manner, they will lose money. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, I understood that. I'm just saying like they're not making enough money to keep their building or pay for their own bills or anything like that. That's what I was trying to argue.
Yeah, but wait, hold on. Why are you saying that? Because if they like what the studies demonstrably show that does happen. They convert these units if they can't recoup their costs. If they lose profits, then they shift. Or they go bankrupt, and then no one wants that apartment building anymore. So someone buys the land and then builds a church on top of it.
No, if they lost too much money to where they couldn't like actually hold the building, that's not profit. That would just be their cost. If they couldn't make their costs, that's not the case. If you're telling me that the reason that they can't make more money on that unit and they're upset about it, so they want to convert it, that's not necessarily something they have to do. That's something they want to do because they want to make money.
But yes, of course. But whenever it comes to policy, we're talking about the way that we can encourage incentivization. Like obviously, if they're incentivized to build different types of housing, they're going to build different types of housing. Shouldn't we encourage them to build housing because we need housing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said earlier. Though that's why New York gives you the tax write-off when you agree to have the stabilized units.
Hunter, let him finish.
But then just do the good thing without the bad thing, bro.
That's the reason why New York, when they agree or a landlord agrees to make these stabilized units, that they go into a contract and they give them a tax write-off on all their properties. That's the reason why they do that. That's an incentive to do stabilized housing. These landlords that have that currently chose to do it.
What do you mean they chose to do it? What do you mean they chose to do it?
If you go to New York, you don't have to agree to make the stabilized units for the tax write-off. You don't have to.
Hold on.
Well, the ones that were mandated were the ones that were built in 1945. If anybody built like a tenant building and chose to put stabilized units in their apartments, then
I don't know enough about New York policy, but
well, I'm curious because I don't know either. Magic, maybe you do.
The rent. So, to my knowledge, it is the case that they don't like literally mandate the building or rent stabilized units, but the new act Mandami is doing is mandating that existing rent stabilized units have to now be frozen. It's no longer, they can't increase their rents at all anymore, as opposed to being limited and how much they can increase it by the board.
When they signed up or they built the stabilized housing, was it under the condition and understanding that the government would freeze their rents?
That I'm not sure of. I'd have to look that one up.
Yeah, hold on.
That matters, I think, to this conversation.
I will be honest. I just used AI to ask this question so we can double check its sources. I'm going to be honest. But it does say, I'm just going to read what it says and then it shows the source and we can investigate it further. No, landlords cannot choose to opt in or opt out of rent stabilization in New York City. Whether an apartment is rent stabilized is determined strictly by state housing laws, not the landlord's preference. An apartment is generally rent stabilized if it meets the following criteria. And then it gives a list called rent stabilized building lists, how to find out if your apartment is rent stabilized. So it seems like if it meets a certain amount of criteria, you're legally obligated to not increase your...
Oh, I thought it was just because I know you do get tax credits for building rent stabilized apartments, but there might be certain things that do have to be mandated, I guess.
The rent past a certain point, and it shows these points, $2,000 if a tenant initially moved into the apartment between these years. And these years, whether or not a tenant moved into an apartment, that's not under your control as a landlord.
It says here, it says tax abatements. New buildings often become rent stabilized if a developer owner chooses to participate in a specific government tax incentive program.
Okay.
Both might be true.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Those
both might be true.
It's possible to specifically, like, if you see that I would be surprised if opting into these rent stabilized units, if the subsidization covers that, because it feels like it really probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I would be shocked if everyone who owns a stabilized property always knew it was A, going to be stabilized, and B, that the stabilized property would be under rent freezes on occasion. But I don't know. I'm not sure. And yeah.
Okay, but let's just say it is. Let's just say it is. And one of the things is if it's built in a specific area that's in high need. Okay, is that a reasonable assumption that we can make?
Repeat what you just said.
That if you can choose to build housing wherever you want, but if you build it in a specific area, it is under their control, it becomes rent stabilized. Is that a fair assumption that we can make?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're decreasing the amount of profit, are we incentivizing them to build elsewhere, outside of where is a need?
Well, you could be. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Mamdani is. That's what his plan is. But if you're asking me, like, specifically within rent control, I don't think so. No.
So usually, when Mamdani talks about building housing, he's not talking about public housing. I could be mistaken on this. I haven't really looked over his specific proposal. But generally, when we're talking about building housing, we're talking about housing permits, because building housing goes through an enormous amount of red tape.
Yeah, the government almost certainly isn't building housing. But
no, of course, no. And that's why I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. But we're talking about 400,000 units. We're talking about fast tracking them through the red tape is approving permits.
Could be wrong. I'll have to check.
I would definitely bet money that it's not.
DM me the source, Magic. Just DM me the source.
Here's the article from Mamdani. I just had a problem. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll look over it and I can confirm either way. Thank you, sir. Let me
But,
read it. It's going to take a minute. Continue to talk, so we're not sitting in
Sure.
silence.
Oh, I was. Yeah. Anyway, it's 100% passing permits. And why would a developer choose to, like, if it's a rent stabilized location, why would they choose to build in that location? Why wouldn't they choose elsewhere? They're like, hey, we can make way more money building luxury apartments. Let's build it elsewhere outside of these specific areas that are in need.
Well, that's the thing about, and the unique thing about New York, I can't speak, New York, because like I said earlier, like these apartments are not all stabilized. Like generally it's only a certain number within the unit, and then like the rest of the apartment can literally be stabilized units. So,
Okay, so
they still make a ton of money on top of having a stabilized unit where they get the tax write-off as well.
Okay, so what's the make or break for stabilization? How do you predict whether or not it's going to be stabilized?
How do I predict?
How does the developer predict?
Oh, how does
Can they?
I'm not sure how they predict that.
So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So it's fine. We can go over either way. If you can't predict it, then they're not going to be incentivized to build in those specific areres. Because if at any moment their profit is curbed, then they're not going to choose in a place. It spooks developers because they're like, why the fuck would I build in New York City? Because they're just going to slash rent freezes all the time. I'll go build in Omaha instead. And they go shift their business elsewhere from New York to Omaha, and they build in places. Sorry, I shouldn't use Omaha. I should use Austin, Texas, or like the places that actually are trying to provide.
Oh no, don't you know the building cycle, Austin, housing boom, yada yada yada.
Build elsewhere, and it's like, why are we encouraging that type of behavior?
Okay, so as I understand it, and I'm mostly through the article, but this is a hybrid plan. So some of it is public housing. It's literally the government is building this. But a large portion of it is constructing through the development process. I'm looking for exact numbers, right? But that's the understanding I get. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out we're just disincentivizing developers. That's all we're doing is we're saying you can't make profit on this, and so they go, fuck you, I'll go operate in a different city. Why am I working here then? And like there are ways, like I really want to hit this. There are a lot of ways that we can we can fix this issue. There are temporary solutions. Like we can housing vouchers are going to be the number one thing that I talk about, or unconditional cash transfers towards people.
Okay, kill me. I'm bored. I can't do it. I can't do the flop. Okay, I want to read. I want my TV fucking go off. 1984. Ruined. Horrible. Alright, I'll stream, either maybe technically later today, considering what time it is, 6 a.m. right now. For sure, actually, I don't know if this is streamed or whatever. Tomorrow, I'm talking to Reniald about some economy stuff, about Trump and the economy and the current state of things. So, that'll be fun. You can head over to fucking Can on YouTube. Okay, see you guys then. I want to go read.